of wood, and I don't know if it's the highest tower in Europe or even in the world made of wood. No.
My first CSE ENT was in 1998, and I was part of a paper in 1997 that somebody else presented, so I go back a little bit.
Oh, quite a history. Oh, God. Well, my first conference ever was 1989, yes. That was the IFIP Congress in San Francisco.
Does anyone else here feel like a baby right now? Because good Lord. It's like, Bastian, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about.
I've been around for a while, but I'm going to continue to be around for a while. My father is about to turn 90, and he only just retired. So he only retired because of the pandemic, because he couldn't. He's a medical doctor, and during the pandemic, they said, "Look, you're too old to risk being in the hospital during the pandemic, so probably not safe to work." He said, "Okay, I'll retire." But other than that, he would still be working today.
That is dedication. That is dedication. No, 90 years old.
Yeah, but he likes working. He likes his job. You know, he's a doctor, and in fact, even in his late 80s, he was considered the best doctor in the hospital for doing the microsurgery, doing surgery under a microscope. His hands were the steadiest. So it was a skill thing, right? I mean, you know, most people aren't very steady when they're in their 80s, but it turns out that because he'd been doing it all his life, that the muscles just kept
adjusted.
Yeah,
it's just so steady. Tell you what, I'm 37 years old. It's 3:46 in the morning, and I can barely keep my hand steady. So kudos to your dad. Holy moly.
Mike, do you remember the picture behind me? It was taken in 2014 from the mountain, you know, where we have been.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So over my left shoulder, you see the picture of what Andreas is behind. Andreas, you see the rest.
Right.
It's just a picture in the other direction, basically, right?
Right. I have to think about it. Oh. Yes. Actually, my iPad, I think it is, when I use the camera on the back, things go one direction, and if I use the other camera, it switches things.
It flips, yeah.
It took me a while to realize that, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Something's flaky with the way they handle their mirroring or whatever, you know. But, and that's the large lake where, no. Have I got the right city where they asked some poor guy to pour out his barrel, and he poured it out and poured it out and poured it out and poured it out, and pretty soon they flooded the place?
That's okay. Well, so it's the Wörthersee, so Lake Wörthersee. Basically, the place where we then had our excursion, that's Maria Wörth.
Yeah, I have pictures and fond memories, and I have a picture of a little statue somewhere of him pouring out water, which
from the barrel, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's in the city of Klagenfurt.
Yes.
I know beer or wine would have been better, so it's just water. But
if it was clean water, it was an amazing thing at that time.
Well, you can drink the water in Lake Wörthersee, which is okay. So
That's pretty good.
Listen, you can drink the water over here in Onondaga Lake near Syracuse too, but man, maybe only once.
That's the reason why beer is better, right? So
see, I'm glad you agree. So maybe if you have a shot of Lake Onondaga water, well, arguably it's gonna get better. But if you have a shot of Lake Onondaga water, you need to chase it with some strong alcohol to kill anything off that might be living in you afterwards, I guess.
Okay. And what is your replicator producing for you?
Well, we have mugs from UCLA with coffee inside.
Okay. Yeah.
It shall be the first of many mugs this morning.
Coffee is good. Yeah. So compressed sun.
We have people joining. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. Dan Port is joining just before he goes to bed.
Becky.
Yesterday.
So Dan, did you get up before the steering committee meeting and you worked today and now you're attending this before you go to sleep? Is that how this worked for you today?
Yep, bookends.
It's amazing because the steering committee was the last thing I did, and then I went sleep, and that's the first thing I do.
Yeah, me
Same
too.
with us, Andreas. Yes.
So bizarre.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Such is the world we live in now, right?
Yes.
Getting a taste of what my students, who I'm teaching in China and India and so on, are having to put up with.
Well, as I mentioned before, I've been telling my students this week that I'm going to Munich for a conference, and they keep going, "Oh, wow, you get beer." And I go, "Well, actually, no, it's virtual." Oh, but it is kind of nice being able to just walk home, connect up, and I'm there, Of course, I have one student who keeps telling me, "You really need to use the goggles." He's a virtual reality student, and he really thinks I should do that. Gear up and really do it right. I think we're just about on time. We should. I see people still joining in. Great. We should probably think about kicking things off. We have about 2 hours. I think Timothy has.
We probably don't need that much time, but there we go.
Yeah, and Daniel has something to say. Maybe I heard he might talk to us anyway. The basic premise of this panel is pretty simple. It's everybody says, "Wow, we should be doing research." What research? Where? And I was trying to think: is it research ideas, themes, topics, areas? There's a whole lot of terms, but basically, what kind of projects should we be trying to tackle probably over the next 5 years? For those of you who may not know it, California has a great teacher who runs it's still going yearly, isn't it, Daniel? I think. He runs a conference where he gets a bunch of people from industry and stuff together, and they talk about exactly this question for their interests. And it struck me that, hey, this group, software engineering education and training, or just software engineering, maybe we should be laying out kind of our agenda, our map of this is what we think would be good things to tackle in the near future. So that's what I proposed, and Timothy was kind enough to say, yeah, I can talk about that. I think I ended up with a very skinny panel, but a very good one. So, hey.
I do understand that Dan Port will be willing to chip in with some thoughts as well. So
good.
Hopefully everybody will, because this
yes,
is collaborative.
Yeah. I did make up forms if we actually want to play games with the forms, but let's see where we go, where we start out. So Timothy and then Daniel, I guess, would you like to talk about things?
Sure. Okay. So I have a short research agenda that I put together, which is about 7 items, and hopefully you can see my screen. So let's talk about the first one. So soft skills. There was actually a very good paper, more than one actually in this conference, but one particular came to my mind yesterday. And I've seen a number of discussions of soft skills in software engineering, and I've observed a lot of students with or without soft skills. Some students succeed and some students don't, and I'm not sure it's correlated with exactly which soft skills they have. And so I think that we actually need to do some research into which soft skills are actually needed, perhaps not necessarily for, perhaps different types of projects or programs or whatever don't necessarily need the same types of skills. Maybe the different corporate cultures can better handle people who have one type of software skill portfolio than another. So that's something I think we need much deeper research into. And what is actually learned. So yesterday there was a paper where there was a couple of lists of soft skills, a long list and a short list. But I kind of divide them into 2 broad categories. The first is the personal category, the inward-looking category. So here you have self-motivation. You know, there are plenty of students who maybe aren't there because they want to be, but many students really are, and they have that already. So they're motivated to do coding, at least, if not the other stuff in software engineering. And then proactiveness, jumping in and getting things done. Those are the students who get the assignments done on time, even if you don't give them a deadline. This summer, I taught the course, Software Engineering Introduction, and I gave no deadlines. I said, aside from the end of the course, hand them in when you want. You get bonuses if you get them in early. And about half the people got them in early. In fact, too many, because I ended up giving too many bonuses. But that's okay, you know? They were proactive and they got them in. And then, of course, we really want people to be able to learn by themselves. And there are some who are absolutely hopeless at that. I mean, I had a capstone student. Most of my capstone students are fantastic, but I had one and I said, go learn the technology you need for this. Whereas 99% of students can do it. This guy, he just needed spoon feeding. He just couldn't learn stuff on his own. And that was a fundamental thing that I thought would be critically needed. He couldn't even do Google searches properly. How could he get that far? Organizedness. Now, I always talk about software cohesion as really being organizedness. You can't do software unless you can organize your code and your designs and so on. But it's more than just that. It's organizing your whole work, organizing the data and so on. And some people are not. And it makes a big difference. Time management, obvious. Attention to detail. That's another area where students differ dramatically. I've seen students who really do, you know, dot the I's and cross the T's, but there are students who don't. And attention to quality is very closely allied with that. You know, the students who are sloppy, no attention to detail, no attention to quality. Then there's perseverance. This is where you got this Heisenberg and you got to track it down, and it takes you forever. A few students can do that, probably a relatively small percentage, but as they get more mature, they get more understanding that perseverance is needed. And in fact, it can drive people nuts. My wife gets driven nuts when I'm perseverant on a problem. She says, give up on the thing, come for supper. No, I got to focus on this. Drive it through to the end, otherwise I'm going to lose track of where I am. Analytic problem solving and debugging, they're kind of, I think they're allied together, but basically it's you know, chess playing, dividing up the problem, thinking about all the possible routes and so on. And some people are good at that, and the good software engineers more or less have to be. And then there's a few other things: creativeness, pressure resilience. Yeah, you've got the deadlines, or if you're agile and hopefully don't have too many deadlines, you still have the pressure from various sources, whether it be pandemic or whatever, that can really derail you. Flexibility and working alone. I mean, although we don't want that stereotype where you have the geek working alone all the time, the Dilbert type thing, in reality, you do sometimes have to do that, and some people are better at than others. And maybe not everybody needs to be good at all of these things, but you know, the best software engineers probably are good at almost all of them. And then there's the external directed ones. These are where we have to think about others. So the written communication, the oral presentation skills, networking. That wasn't in my previous list. I put that in after watching a paper yesterday. You know, maybe not necessarily needed for core software engineering, but certainly it really helps if you are going to be a consultant or something. Collaboration, we've seen that. There's been a shift in the last 15 years. Students now are really good at collaboration, almost all of them, with a few very small exceptions, because at least in Canada, they do a tremendous amount of that in K-12. So they come into university, collaboration is the way it goes. But there are a few people who can't. And that's okay. I think, you know, have to be the exceptions. Then there's empathy and user understanding. And this is an area where, you know, not everybody can do it. Not everybody has the personality for that. But we do need a significant number of software engineers to really have that ability. And it's something that we certainly need to measure and understand better, because if you don't understand what your users need, you're going to be really bad at doing requirements. You're going to be really bad at doing user interface design, and just simply showing the prototype to the user and getting their feedback. If you don't see when they make the mistake and you get frustrated because they're making the mistake, as opposed to saying, they're making a mistake with the software because the software is crappy, you know, that's a problem. Then there's a few others. Leadership, interviewing. Students are saying, you know, wow, we got to get these jobs with Google and Microsoft and all these companies, and we need the skills in how to do the interviews. Well, I wouldn't call it a core software engineering skill, but it certainly seems to be a skill that students want. Negotiation. This is negotiation of requirements, negotiation with users about expectations. You know, that's critical. I see that in my capstone students. Some can, some can't. And it's a skill that they build in their capstone, which we do with end clients. This sense of commitment to people and to getting things done for others, as opposed to, oh, well, whatever, we're doing our best, but not really. Professional responsibility is very closely allied with that. And then there's simply this notion of ethical behavior. Do you feel ethical? I've had a number of cases where students are saying, we're scraping some website. I say, did you look at the terms of reference? Can you do that? You know, whatever. You know, well, okay. You know, you got to think about these things. So that's part of the soft skills puzzle, and that's the categorization. And we need to do some research into that. And I'm not happy with short lists of soft skills. I think the long list is better, because these things are different. And I think you can have some combination of these and without some other combination. And although there are some correlations, I'm not sure that they're all really, you know, you can't sort of buttonhole them into 3 or 4 buckets. It doesn't really work. Then the other thing about soft skills is I think we need to do research into, do students really need to learn the same set? It may be that we shouldn't try to expect all students to have all of these things. It may be that, in fact, investing time in some particular subset would be better for some students than others. And I think we need research into that. Then, you know, particular jobs, positions, and companies may need one set, and other positions or jobs or companies may need another set more. You know, there are companies that don't do stuff where they're going to really be interacting with the users. They're doing deep embedded stuff, or they're doing AI that's where we have to interact with a machine as opposed to an end user. So maybe they're okay without the user empathy. On the other hand, I think most people do need that. And the same goes for any one of these other soft skills. And then we also have to think accessibility. There are people with particular personalities and disabilities, although that's a pejorative term in some areas. So I'm thinking of people with autism spectrum disorder, okay? And I think there's quite a few people who do software engineering that are at the high end, you know, people who used to call Asperger's, who have you know, a very interesting spectrum of subset of these soft skills. Some of them will not have the empathy for users. It just doesn't come to them because it's not part of the brain makeup. Although I do believe that there is a subset of people with ASD who actually are very good at interacting with users. And they might in fact be so good at interacting with users that you put them right there in front because they get so sensitive to the users every nuance. I think we need research into that. I think we need to bring people in and talk to them. I mean, universities are getting much better at accessibility these days. Universities are, have departments and counselors and so on. But I don't think we make an effort to mesh the educationalists with the counseling team and the mental health experts and say, you know what, everybody doesn't have to be good at everything. And we can find these people with different kinds of personalities and disabilities and match them better to different sets of, maybe even different courses or different ways that courses are taught. So that's the first point, soft skills. The second point is bodies of knowledge and standard curricula. So I was involved in SE 2004, and we had a body of knowledge we called SEEK, and it's been updated since then, and SE 2014 is the thing. I was also involved in SWEBOC, and I was also involved in a Canadian body of knowledge into the information technology industry. And, my observation is, I think there's three things. One is that people who develop these try to push their own agenda a little bit. I'm a little bit guilty of that myself. I pushed user interface into Seek, and pushed also to get it into SWEBOC because I did some research that showed that was a big knowledge gap in industry. Other people push formal methods and so on. And if you look at particular areas of SWEBOC, there's still the imprimatur of particular leaders of that area. So I'm a little bit skeptical of the bodies of knowledge. I also find that they reference a particular set of textbooks and a particular set of papers that, and they may not be ideal, but more importantly, I do a lot of interaction with industry because I run the capstone course and we run it with students working in industry. And I also talk to a lot of students who are going off to jobs in big companies. And that includes the Microsofts and the Googles and the all other big companies. We have students going to all of them and they come back and they say, here's what's going on in industry. And they actually talk about that stuff. And I'm amazed at their capstone projects because they know it. They know what's going on. They do it in the capstone. They teach me, including, the latest stuff. And all the big companies are doing agile. And agile is not a static thing. It's an evolving thing. And they come back and tell me how this year there's a trend in this direction in agile and how the methods are changing. And that's fantastic, but that's not getting into the bodies of knowledge because they get updated much less frequently. And they get updated by professors who are, or industrial people in a different class of company. I've noticed you tend to find the people in the aerospace and automotive and in military industrial type companies that are more pushing their more formalized agenda, and that's a completely legitimate agenda. They have different needs. They have more security and so on. But we're not getting the right kinds of spectrum of companies to produce the bodies of knowledge. So I think that we need to really, really research whether we're teaching the right bodies of knowledge. Maybe we need to, in fact, to say explicitly, yeah, there is software engineering for types of companies that do aerospace and automotive, and software engineering for types of companies that produce consumer software like Google and Microsoft, and teach students explicitly that there is a spectrum of methods. But the bodies of knowledge maybe aren't quite there, not quite the way to do it. And let's look at the bodies of knowledge. Are these actually being used in industry? What percentage are being used? Do they match what industry is doing? Are they a good basis of our education? Third point comes back to the panel from 2 days ago, and that is there's been this tension between software engineering and other branches of engineering. We in our university have a single school which teaches electrical engineering, computer engineering, software engineering, and computer science. And it's a fantastic melting pot because you have professors who teach across several aspects of that spectrum, and we can see things. And there's a push at the dean's level, there has been at different times, to say, you know what, we should give common courses. I don't think it works because you have people coming into software engineering who are programming geeks, and people coming into other branches of engineering like electrical who don't know how to program at all. And you really can't do a first year course effectively if you have people who are totally disillusioned because they're learning how to do loops, you know, for the first time, theoretically, when in fact they've been doing it for 15 years since they were 5, you know, or whatever. But anyway, there are lots of concepts that overlap, however, with other areas of engineering. And I think that we at least need to try and broaden the understanding of software engineers, that their area is specialized, but also has things in common. And I'm not going to repeat what I said in the panel from 2 days ago, but I did make analogies with bridge building, and there's tons and tons of generalized things that are similar there. And then the flip side of this is, should other engineers be required to learn software engineering material? Because my observation has been that you go into, say, civil engineer, and they're taking software engineering as an elective, and then they don't go on. But some of them say, you know what, wow, you do things differently here, and it's interesting, and they like it. But then you have civil engineers who've never taken software engineering, and they say, oh, I know how to program, I know it all. And you know, they clearly don't, because there's some people in other branches of engineering, and even in computer science, say, we don't need to know that specialized software engineering stuff. We just need to know programming and algorithms and, you know, data structures, and we got it, you know? So that kind of research is needed. Next point is, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, we have tons of people going in doing co-ops. We call them co-op jobs if they're 4 months, or internships, other kinds of placements in industry. And they are learning a ton. And I did that back in the early 80s. I learned a vast amount of different stuff when I was a co-op student than from what I learned in university. And they complemented incredibly well, to the point where about 8 years ago at the University of Ottawa, we made placements mandatory. You have to do at least a year and a half of work that's graded by the university. It's in industry with real companies, and it's part of the curriculum. It's a requirement now. Not every university does that. Many universities don't, but some do. And I think we need research into how effective this is. How effective is it for the students who didn't? Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few students come through who haven't, because they came through the old program, and the students who have, what a difference it is in terms of their ability to do things. So it would be useful to study what they actually learn in industry, and how students coming back from industry contribute to the classroom, and how we can improve the classroom by making sure that the knowledge students have learned while in industry percolates among other students. We need to be synergistic with these students. We need to maybe do some Socratic, you know, kind of stuff in terms of leveraging this knowledge that they bring back. And then there's skills versus knowledge. So I've kind of come to believe that there are some things that we do in our field which are skills like learning music. I regret that I never learned the piano or another instrument. I did, however, learn to sing very well, and I sang in choirs. It's something that is a skill that you get better and better at over time. And programming, for me, is another one of those things that I got better and better at over time. And actually, to be totally frank, you know, hitting a ball with a bat is one of those things as well. I mean, I was really atrocious as a kid. I've only really got better since I've had my own kids, because I had to have to bat the ball for them. Programming is one of those things. There are some knowledge aspects to it, but it's a skill that you have to do over and over and over again. And just like in music, you don't want to just learn a few pieces or even a few styles. If you want to be a good musician, you need to be versatile. You need to learn pieces from many different composers and many different musical styles to be a really well-rounded musician. Same thing with programming. You need to be exposed to programming in different languages and different domains, and, you know, different paradigms, you know, logic programming and concurrency and all those kinds of things. Your skills get deeper and deeper and deeper. But it's not just that's a skill. It's learning languages themselves. You know, students need to rapidly get over the hump of well, I'm a genius at Python. Well, yeah, okay, you need to be a genius at Java, you need to be a genius at 3 or 4 other things, and then you can say you're a programmer. Most students in our programs are by the 4th year, but there are still a few universities that really don't do that well, something that we need to research. Debugging, I think, is a separate skill from programming. I have met people who are great programmers, but give them a program, a large one, and large is necessary. Give them a large program and say, go to it. There's a bug, especially one of these ephemeral bugs that goes away, the Heisenberg bug. You know, it's going to take you 5 or 6 hours, but you're going to find it. You know, here's the source code. Yeah, heaven forbid you don't have that, but let's assume they have the source code. You know, that's a skill. It takes time to be really good at debugging, especially in languages and technologies and code you don't know. And we need to give students tons and tons and tons and tons of practice. And to be frank, this is something that does require individual work. It's an individual skill. Yeah, you can be an orchestra musician, and you should be, or you know, play in a band. You need to know how to play with others. But at the same time, you're going to be practicing by yourself. And so you better be really good at that. And I've seen a few students get through to our 4th year, including even this year, that are bad programmers, didn't get the skill because they were collaborating, and it wasn't cheating. It was, we've been pushing it too much. You know, the balance there hasn't been there. I also think testing, and I put testing and cracking together, and I use that word cracking in the sense of try to break code as a separate skill from programming and debugging. I think that being able to find security flaws or other kinds of flaws is a critical skill we need to teach students. And with all these, we need to do research into, you know, how much of this is a skill. How can we really boost this skill and get them to do it? They say 1,000 hours to become really an expert at one of these skills, right? We need to give them the time. We need to give them the assignments to do these kinds of things. General design, architecture, as separate from program, might be a separate skill from these. I think it's correlated probably with programming, but they often don't get to do the high level design nearly as much as they get to do the programming in the universities. And then, of course, the soft skills are skills. All of them are skills. So all the stuff on the previous slide, we need to give them tons and tons and tons of practice. So that's why going in the co-op or internships, they do get practice doing some of these soft skills, but we need to give time for them to deepen those skills in many more ways. How do they do it in music? How do they do it in fine arts? Then after skills, there's 2 kinds of knowledge. There's the lasting knowledge and the ephemeral knowledge. The ephemeral knowledge is stuff that is here today and probably gone in 10 years, or at least much less important. Particular languages, particular frameworks. So then what is the lasting knowledge? Stuff that, you know, you're glad that you memorized it, or you're glad that you learned it from a book or in exams. And this is really the stuff that can be best taught in exams. So, you know, some of the basics of algorithm analysis and some core algorithms. Now, these days, students are not necessarily doing nearly as much coding of algorithms because they're using packages where the algorithm's already written. But nonetheless, there will still be some of it. And I think that lasting knowledge is needed. Testing strategies, not necessarily testing specific languages, but general strategies for testing, I think, is probably lasting knowledge. Architectural tactics, typical word from one of the papers yesterday, you know, as opposed to specific architectures. Yeah, some of the specific architectures will be lasting, but the tactics are probably you know, something we can really teach people as knowledge. And then the basic principles of process and basic principles of quality. So I think we need to try and tease out in research which are which and how can we teach better each of these categories. And then, you know, what are the knowledge, I've got the Zoom thing in front of, I can't even read my own slide there, skill gaps. Okay, so back in the late 1990s, I did some research, survey research in a large number of companies. Well, I did 300 people in total. And it was published in IEEE Computer. It was actually rejected from IEEE Software, but it's been one of my most cited papers. And it was, you know, what are the skill gaps in industry? And this is where I got this notion of some of the soft skills. There was gaps, but particularly the ability to work with users and user interface design. A couple of people have picked up my survey and have given it in their own small countries. But I think we need more of this kind of thing, because I identified 2 kinds of gaps. One is the gap of knowledge, which, you know, is best learned in industry. a lot of this is the skills and the industrial practices. And another kind of gap was the knowledge which they never learn in industry. Certain kinds of basic abilities to deal with algorithms and stuff like that. Whatever happens, we need evidence for all of these slides to set directions. We need better ways of getting evidence, and it's not easy. Doing this kind of research requires collaboration among professors in universities in many countries. If I set out to do one of these things, it's going to be a 3 or 4 year project, and if I'm going to get a grant to do it, I'm going to need to work with others because it's a body of work. Okay, so we need to work as a team to get this stuff done. So I'm going to flip back to my very first slide just so that you can see the list and kind of assessments that work is something I forgot to put a slide on for, but there we go. What assessment of all of these things actually works in terms of exams and other kinds of things? How can we actually assess soft skills? How can we actually assess whether or not we're grading students on the soft skills? We still need to be able to measure whether they've got them or not. And we certainly need to be able to measure whether they've got the knowledge or not. And, I'm not sure we've done enough research into assessing. So I'll call it a day and pass the torch back.
Wow. Thank you very much. That's quite a list. I've got lots of thoughts about lots of pieces of it, but I probably shouldn't take the time now. Gee.
Get other people to talk.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get Dan Port to put his thoughts in at least, because he said he would. But there's a bunch of other people here too.
Dan, are you kicking around up there? You still
Sure,
awake?
I'm here. I'm here.
Or awake again, or whatever?
I'm more or less awake. So be patient with me, folks. Thank you for putting with maybe some incoherent follow-ups. I think that what I can follow up a little bit on some of the things that Tim touched on that I've been thinking about. Let me see if I can share. Can I get the share screen? There we go. Okay. All right. So one of the things I've been kicking around for a number of years is this is really touches on what Tim was talking about, the skill versus knowledge. And I couldn't agree with him more, especially programming. Programming is almost entirely skill. And it's a real bear teaching programming, as we all know. And even teaching software engineering with programming components can be, a huge challenge, even if they've already built some skills. So it kind of, I've been thinking over a long period of time, how, given that there's so much skill that is involved in software engineering, and how can we align our teaching with the idea of building the needed skills. And so I've been noodling around for a while with looking at this idea of cognitive levels. So I think I would love to see more research in this idea of different cognitive levels of software development and aligning our teaching with building those cognitive levels. And so, again, this might be completely off, but just roughly I've observed over the years of doing this, as maybe you have also, that there seem to be sort of 4 distinctive levels, cognitive levels, that students must progress through. They must build their skills up to this. And it's not people don't seem to learn or to build these skills in a linear fashion. It's not like if they just sit there and keep acquiring knowledge or keep practicing, that it's just suddenly it comes in bursts, you know, big bursts. It's like so I would call the first one syntactic, just putting together, you know, understanding basic syntax and knowing what a correct statement, you know, is. Believe it or not, it's been so long that most of you don't even realize that that's actually quite a challenge. Moving from something like natural English to a programming language is not a natural language to a programming language is not an easy step for some students. They often, you know, as you know, they think the computer can magically understand what it is they want to be said. You know how, right? And it's like, oh, I could just talk to the computer and it'll figure it out, you know, fill in the gaps and things like that. And so finally you realize that the computer is very stupid and they have to put things exactly in the way that it needs to see it. Otherwise it won't work at all. Anyway, so syntactic. And then that, you know, pretty quickly they, with some education and practice, they you know, they can't do anything, but suddenly, boom, they can do it. You know, they can manage to put together a statement that works, you know, whether it's some basic HTML or whatever, just a command, or something like that. Without forgetting the semicolon or something like that. And then the next hurdle is to get them to algorithmic kind of cognitive skills. You know, how do you put these statements together in such a way that they actually solve a problem that, you know, that the computer doesn't even know that it's solving, right? And so that's as you know, another challenge for us is to, you know, set up the kind of curriculum and whether it's assignments and things like that, and that draw them into and through this level of being able to think algorithmically and put together that. And then yes, there's even another challenge after that. After they finally get the basics of that, the computer doesn't know what it's doing, and I have to tell it how to do it. And now they know how to tell the computer to do it. They need to be able to put those things together into different components and frameworks and build an application that's a cooperative interaction of a multitude of algorithms. And that I've observed is even a greater challenge, for which they do tend to make slower progress towards. It's not just nothing, but you know, they're pretty clueless for a long time until they really get through some magic level for which they can actually build an application. They can actually think about how to start, take some requirements and understand how to translate get a design, think about a design and translate that into a functioning application, which is usually the best I can hope for most of my students, is to sort of get them just to that very beginning of application oriented thinking. But as the students, of course, get more advanced, and as we get to things, maybe more advanced engineering, things like that, the next level, which I think is quite a challenge, is system level cognitive thinking. And so I really think this is an exciting area for research. I do. And I've been myself, I haven't really had the guts to actually write a paper on anything like this, but I have aligned my courses along these different cognitive levels, and trying to find, just thinking about what do you do, what sequence you teach it in, what kinds of assignments do you have that help draw them, in and through these different levels. And I think it's working pretty well. I do. It seems to be aligning my curriculum with, and my teaching with the development of these skill levels has made a huge difference in the success of what I can do with my students. And here's the problem, with, again, following up on what's, you saw that Tim just blasted out a huge number of things. He's talking about the skills versus knowledge. I mean, we don't have that much time. with our students to be able to just constantly give them the essential practice that they need to build these skills. I mean, we just have to fundamentally admit that we can certainly impart some knowledge that can go very quickly, but it's not very useful if they don't have the skill to actually apply that knowledge into things. And as Tim pointed out, it just needs, there's no way around it. It just needs, just requires an enormous amount of practice and reinforcement. And I've been thinking about, by looking at these cognitive levels, I think the best we can do is to think about how we could put them on a path, get them introduced to what these skills are and how they can build them, and put them on a path for which they can go off and continue to build those skills continuously on their own. As I believe, professional engineers, software engineers do. I think they're always honing and building their skills, not just their knowledge, but I think they're always learning more and improving their skill in such a way that they're, in immense number of ways, whether it's just becoming more efficient in how they do things, or it could be in acquiring a better and deeper understanding of how to think system, build system level kinds of applications, things like that. So anyways, this is something I would propose that would be an exciting avenue for research, for educational research, for us to think about how we can align and build and work in the software engineering curriculum with different cognitive skill levels, whether it's detecting what level students are at, whether it has to do with how do we effectively draw them into it or bring them through or put them on a path. I think that there's lots of things. So anyways, I don't want to dominate too much. I certainly would open this up to some discussion and tell you that and share some of the stuff that I have and offer collaboration. The other thing that there's just two other things that I would like to offer for future research, just to stimulate hopefully get some neurons going for you guys. In addition, is I think that we really do a very poor job in really helping students understand design judgment. In fact, I don't think we teach it at all, really. So we certainly teach things about design. We talk about different kinds of designs. But we don't really spend much time on the important thing, which is how do you actually evaluate and choose a design that's going to be, suitable in the engineering sense from for whatever you're doing. So I know that we talk about there's a lot of things about design qualities that we teach, but I think an interesting area of research would be to really think about teaching design judgment, evaluations of design and how to recognize whether a design is going to be effective or maybe not so effective, and choosing between things. And I started to kick around some of this, where I would survey students I'd give them two different designs, and I'd ask them things like, which is more easily implemented, how's extended, things like that. And of course, you want to follow up and ask them the rationale. Why do you say these things? And it's a very interesting, the difference in students, in professionals versus our students in design judgment. So I think that the design judgment thing is something that people tend to learn the hard way on the job, and we're not doing our students much of a service by sending them into the environment where they just don't have much skill or ability to do this. And given my surveys from things like that, my observation is that students tend to be very poor at evaluating designs. They just don't have that. I think Rick Kaisman was putting it the other day. It's like, design is hard, and you've got to fight for it, and it's just hard. He kept saying it's hard, and it's just something that the veterans just had learned over many years of experience. And it's not that I don't disagree with him so much, but I think maybe I disagree with him in the sense that I think design judgment can be learned, and I think it can be learned earlier than through the hard fought battles that they have to have later. And of course, some people are naturally going to be better at it from the start, but then again, as Tim pointed out, we have all kinds of different students with different backgrounds and things like that, and they come with all kinds of different advantages and disadvantages. I think that there's definitely a playing field that we can offer that can help foster the improvement and design skills for everyone. So I think this is another fruitful area of research, is to think about teaching design judgment and evaluation. Yeah. And then the last thing I would offer is just, I don't have anything prepared for it, but it's just this idea of that it seems that certain themes and principles just keep coming up over and over and over again in education, software engineering education. And it would be really nice to kind of, to really try to map those out. Like, really, what are the educational principles that work in software engineering education? Things like Tim was talking about, cooperation and the need for I think principles for by which you can giving experience, like industry kind of relevant experience and things like that. So I don't know. Again, I don't have a lot of specifics on this, but it just seems to me that there really are some core education principles that would be wonderful for us to unearth and maybe illuminate for all to enjoy and build upon. Anyways, that's it. Those are some of my thoughts, and I'd love to hear some more discussion on these things and what Tim was talking about also.
Outstanding. Do we have anyone else who wants to? Oops, sorry. Do we have anybody else who wants? Yeah, Gerhard, I think, is raising his hand. At least.
But also Marian was raising his hand, so I'm not really sure, because just while the other ones were talking, I just wrote down my thoughts about it from an industry point of view, and I'm not really sure if that makes sense in this conference, but it just some ideas that came up the last days, and so I could at least try. So how to do that? Bildschirmpräsentation.
That's the green button.
Yeah. I know. But the question is, I'm a little bit. Okay, let's do it like this. I think you should be able to see something. Mm-hmm. I won't go into full screen because otherwise I can't see Zoom anymore. So I think what really would help is to put a little bit more emphasis on the purpose of why we are doing things, and to be able to digest that. For example, having a look at design thinking, lean startup methods. So business model, for what do we do all that? Have a look at Wardley maps, for example. Having this kind of things in your mind that you can play around with why you are doing something, because most software in these days won't be really used in a sensible way. So try to avoid everything that is not really helping other people. Then what I see is will be a big problem, or is already a big problem, that we have large systems and old systems, and to to have some mental models how to deal with them and how to evolve them, and not to throw away everything because it's just not feasible anymore. So have a look at how we can navigate the existing structures in a really efficient way, and have a look, for example, what one colleague is doing, Fink.com. Have a look at this kind of systems that try to make it easier to navigate large amounts of software, of source code. As you probably heard from me already, we have done something like ArcUnit. It's an open source framework to be able to have fast feedback loops, at least when you do some Java-based programming, where you can define some architectural rules inside of test cases. I think having things like that, why is not something like that coming out of the research of universities? I don't understand why we as a consulting company have to do something like that, and it seems to be really basic in my opinion. So it should be able for universities to pick on that and improve this kind of thinking a little bit more. Then we think that all relevant problems nowadays have to be done by teams. So everyone should have a good understanding of teamwork and how to make decisions in teams and how to structure teams in a way that it is harmonized with technology. And what I found quite interesting in last year is Curiosity30.org, because it's coming from an agile world, from a lot of good practices together with some other thoughts that make this kind of working together more structured and good digestible. Of course, you have security and ethics. I think this is one of the things that every software engineer has to understand, because we have so many people in the industry that don't have a software engineering background. So at least a few people should have thought about security and ethics stuff. Yeah, and we are then the ones that really say, have a look at that, that will have that impact. So we need some people at the industry for that. So another idea that came up is, I think, to be able to understand what computers are doing and what software can do, or what is possible, we need some more knowledge about that at society at large. So we need an open curriculum for software engineering for schools and the whole society to be able to explain more, to have some basic knowledge. And I think this should be done from universities as well, or could be done. And really have something that can be used by every teacher in the whole world, and just have a basic common curriculum and standards what should be known at society at large. In general, having mental models is a good thing, and I'm a big fan of them. The thing that is, I'm not so sure about which ones are really important and which ones not, so that probably might need some research as well. And for example, when you have individual software engineering, so that companies who are building software, what I see in a lot of companies, a lot of clients, they don't understand individual software development at all, what that means for them. And I think there's a huge amount of resources wasted because of that, because they don't understand what individual software development means, how expensive it is, how long things will have to be maintained, how to work with existing data, how will that have to improve. So I think there's lots of things that should be worked on, and this is often not done correctly. And what I'm feeling generally, I'm not so sure if the universities, how they work today, is something that will be there in the future, because the industry is often more advanced than research. So I think this is something that is strange for me, because when I came out of university, some professors were even not accepting good practice from the industry as relevant. And this is something that I couldn't understand. And also that sometimes how we worked at projects, at product development, is more advanced than what is taught at universities. So in other in other industries, I think that research is typically further advanced than the practical work. So it's in the computer science and in the software engineering industry, it's vice versa. I would say that what is taught at universities is typically 5 to 10 years older than the current practice. And that's strange. That's really not something that I would like to have, because it also is not, when you come as a student and you see then in the industry what is possible and what you haven't heard about, it's feeling awkward. So what I would suggest is try to integrate industry good practice. I wouldn't say best practice, because that's so different. And if you have something in mind like the Sinefin framework, then you can't do it anyway. But for highly complex things, you should try to integrate industry working and knowledge more in the research, and probably empirical research should be more integrated into than the practice, so that you really try to integrate it a lot more. So that were just some random thoughts. It wasn't prepared really well, but I hope at least some ideas were helpful for you.
Great.
Oh, I think that's great. Let's see. Yeah, Axel, are you raising your hand or just scratching your ear? I'm not sure. That's one of the problems with Zoom.
I think Marian is raising his hand.
But I was not the next one in the queue who has raised his hand.
Okay. Who's next?
Okay. Hi. I would like to come back to the skills where you all three basically talked about, particular Tim in the beginning. However, I have a short disclaimer in advance that there might be some different views due to the educational systems. So I must say in Germany, we teach programming to students, but we do not train programmers. So if you want to become a programmer, then you typically do an apprenticeship, and this is not the aim of university level. So this might be a bit a difference. What I found very interesting on the first presentation of Tim for the skills is that there are many skills out there, and we often assume or have the idea that when we are done with the student and university is over, the student should be able to be perfect on all skill levels and know everything. However, what we see with our students, our graduates, there's not that one work profile of a software engineer. So there are even students that will never again in their life see a line of code. And so maybe, and this is, I think, a very interesting question you had, is maybe it's not that if students fail in their job later on that we did a bad job at teaching or lecturing them, but maybe we did a bad job at showing them their right place in the software engineering field. So that we need more research on which skills do contribute to which role or which aspect of software engineering, and so that we can push the students more in the right direction. This was just a thought of mine to your presentation. I really liked it. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I tend to agree with Marian. I'm sorry if I'm jumping in here out of place. I tend to agree with Marian. One of the things that I'm noticing in here at this small public university that I am here in the US is that you're right. You know, some people will never touch a line of code again, and I'm noticing that there's even in the field of software engineering, there are those that couldn't bother with diagrams and documentation to save their lives, and there's on the other hand those people who hate everything technical and who much rather much rather do the meticulous job of documentation or customer relation or requirements in engineering, and they are all software engineers in the end, right?
Yeah, I would like to say this, that I do agree that there will be people who graduate from software engineering education programs that don't touch a line of code again. But I would think nonetheless, they do need to have a considerable experience in programming before they stop doing it. And I make an analogy to music again. You know, if you are going to be an orchestra manager, or you are going to be, you know, somebody in that business, and you can't understand what it's like to be a musician, you're going to be a terrible manager. I had that experience when I was in industry. One of my first jobs, the manager was a physicist, and he just did not understand what it was like to program, and he was a terrible manager as a result. Whereas other managers I had who really did know how to program, yeah, they got it. They understood the pressures and the troubles we had.
Tim, I've had a manager who, he had a business management background and claimed that, you know, this made him able to tell us what to do. And basically he ran into complete resistance from everybody.
Right. So there are people who are bad at everything, you know, there we go.
The born manager.
Gilbert's boss.
There were several other people who had their hands up a while back.
Yeah, I've lost track of who was hoping to talk next.
Anders, there's Anders.
Bastian, you're not muted, but did you want to say something?
May I have the word?
Sure.
Sure, thank you. I'm Anders Sjögren. I'm from Stockholm and the Royal Institute of Technology. And I have a research area that I would propose, an urgent research area, and that is software that is about sustainability. I guess you are familiar with Greta Thunberg from Stockholm. Is it anyone who hasn't heard about her? It's our young activist concerning environment, sustainability.
I think everybody's heard, but maybe we don't pronounce her name quite that way because you pronounce it correctly and we don't. But yes.
but her message in her talks is about action. Actually, what she demands is action from the worldwide community. And I think a research question here is actually, what responsibilities do we have in educating our future software engineers in concerns about saving the globe? I mean, this is quite urgent, and this is quite big issues for our next generation of engineers. And I have a lot of shortcomings when my students actually dig up these kind of questions when we do our capstone projects, our software engineering projects and programming courses and so on. And how should we deal as a future engineer with those sustainability issues? How can we as future software engineers be able to have an impact in order to fix all the mess that your generation has come up with? And I think this question blows every other question away. And I think that we need, as a responsibility academic community, we need to firstly agree on our responsibility in this area. And I think this responsibility that we carry towards our future engineers is quite heavy, it's quite big, and it's quite important. And I would suggest that for the next conference of this kind, I think there should be a main question about that. How do we teach and educate our future engineers in order to be able to clean up all the mess that we have accomplished? And I think there are a lot of aspects and there are a lot of responsibility that falls on software engineers. Because if you look into the future, software will be everywhere. Software will be in IoT things and cars. And so if you, sorry. So that is my suggestion for research area. Firstly, to find different kind of research questions that needs to be answered, and I think the first question is actually to come up with a good research questions in this area. And I have several things that I would that I could propose, but yes, we can go on this discussion, but this is my message and my wish. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I think I would agree strongly with you there that should have been probably on my list as well. Now you think about it, there is actually a track in ICSE on software engineering for good, and I've seen a number of different tactics on this. One of them is software that enables sustainability. And another one is sort of training students to volunteer to spend time working on projects that are going to facilitate sustainability. And another one is making sure that when we develop software that we're not going to be pushing consumerism and high power and so on and so forth. I mean, I see Bitcoin as the absolute epitome of the opposite of what we're talking about, because it's all based around sucking energy in order to somehow build an infrastructure, and it's absolutely a terrible thing if you think about sustainability.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm noticing that resonates with me, and I think it touches upon most of the things that we have touched upon today, is this, and this is something that Pierre said consistently during their ACED afternoon session, and I think one of the things that I'm struggling also with, and I'm placing a lot of emphasis on teaching my students, is meticulousness, right? We have to be like, this is less of a skill, this is more of a trait. And this is kind of what I reminded myself when I said that earlier, that some will never program, some are more of a documentation type of people, and some really should have or should adopt like a product perspective, right, over the things that we build, in order to be able to foster things like sustainability, in order to be able to, make the changes that we want to make. And I think it takes a certain kind of person to do that. It takes a certain kind of person with a certain level of detail. So the question is, how do we wait for these students to just self-select into software engineering, or how can we teach meticulousness?
That was my attention to detail. I think, are they the same, or is there a subtle difference?
Yeah, that reminded me of when we discussed the traits that you have to have for certain software engineering competencies, and notice that meticulousness was in every single one that Nancy and John and Pierre suggested on Tuesday afternoon. I just noticed that, and you mentioned it yourself in your presentation just now, right? You mentioned attention to detail, and then Dan said the same thing when he said, well, we have to have skill levels. And I'm noticing that, well, at some point, Dan looped back to you and said, listen, we need, this attention to detail that only comes into play when you really adopt an application perspective. And now Anders says the same thing. He says, listen, we need to instill a sense of what's important beyond what's right in front of our nose, right? We need to have not only a product perspective or an application perspective, but a global perspective. And in my opinion, this doesn't happen by accident. This happens when you're this happens when you're meticulous, I guess. Does it?
Bastian, just a quick follow-up. So in my personal experience, meticulousness is inherent in some people and not in others, but those that don't necessarily demonstrate it can be given the opportunity to demonstrate it, depending on how we framework around them. So when you give them project courses, when you give them real world projects, when you give them perhaps projects that they define themselves and problems that they feel motivated to do, that's when their meticulousness seems to then suddenly explode out of them.
Yes.
That's probably true. So you're saying that, well, we have to find projects that motivates them to be meticulous. We have to make them do things.
I would say it's not a case of they all become meticulous when you give them this opportunity. It's just you provide others who don't necessarily come out of their shell to, you give them that opportunity to do that. I think a lot of people have a lot of capabilities that they don't necessarily demonstrate because of the constraints of how they are taught. When they're told you need to demonstrate X, Y, and Z, they will go away and demonstrate just X, Y, and Z to get those grades because they put all their effort into doing that.
We're teaching them with KPIs, right? We are already telling them, here's a way of how I'm going to evaluate you. Now go meet those KPIs, right? And this KPI oriented thinking is exactly the kind of thinking that gets us into this whole, climate change mess also, right?
Yeah, and it's not universal. Some won't thrive in that scenario, and some will thrive. It doesn't matter what you throw at them. It's classic. It's a spectrum, but yeah.
That's interesting. I had never heard somebody criticize KPI thinking, and so maybe I've been going along with the.
I don't know. It's maybe I'm this this diehard communist that is basically one building brick short of starting a revolution, but I think KPI oriented thinking is terrible. I mean,
I love that because I just got myself on a committee to work on KPI thinking for the university's enterprise architecture. And I now go in and say, I'm going to be a radical and say the whole idea is shot, but I need evidence as to why. Thank you for letting me think about that way.
Well, you're welcome, I guess. So I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, in certain respects, we have to have, performance measures, obviously. And, in order to, the very nature of a university should be, here is things you can learn. And I'm specifically using the auxiliary verb can, as opposed to must, because if you don't want to, then all right, well, so long and thanks for all the fish, right? But we're offering apprenticeship, we're offering help to those who are interested in learning it, and most, I suppose, will.
But
in order to make let me just finish that one thought, and of course, with that comes the burden of having to evaluate people and establish some kind of comparison between them, and that's where this comes from, right? So, but I think the very nature of university, the very nature of learning is, well, here's an opportunity. Now go forth and be excellent somewhere in something. Sorry, I'm done.
But just to KPI, you mean the key point of interest parameter when you talk about KPI?
Key performance indicator.
Yes.
Key performance indicator.
But yeah, all right. Thank you. Because I mean, this is the traditional way of thinking. But what we need, a research question here is, for example, what KPI parameters do we need to bring into the system in order to put sustainability as the most important KPI factor? Because if the community already have the algorithm of calculating KPIs, I mean, then we need to give the student the opportunity into their software engineering project to bring in this new kind of KPIs that will see a better evolution in our environment than we had before. So, I mean, the KPI aspect, I see it as an opportunity actually, but who will carry in those kind of KPIs in software engineering? I think the academy is the main responsibility factor that has to take on this responsibility, because I'm not sure that industry will put those kind of parameters into their way of calculating business.
Yes, you're right, and this leads me. There's a whole a trainload of thoughts in my head that I have about these things, and they all sort of stick together. And one of the things that I'm thinking is that this is, you're right. We'll never convince industry to not be in any particular way KPI oriented, and it's just not going to work, because industry thrives from comparison with one another, or more negatively formulated competition with one another, and in order to compete you have to have KPIs. The thing though is this is the kind of thinking that got us into this mess. Like last week, actually, we had a department meeting where we talked about how we can foster diversity, equality, and inclusion in our software engineering students. And it frustrates me because I'm thinking, listen, DEI is not necessarily something that makes you a better software engineer. And then it hit me. Or does it though? Because if we're not preparing our students to be KPI oriented, we're doing them a disservice, because they won't be able to compete in the real world. But on the other hand, in order to foster meticulousness, in order to make them motivated about things, in order to motivate them to think about new things in different ways and solve the problems of the future, like you said earlier, the problems that our generation screwed up in the first place, we have to allow them and enable them to thrive their own motivation, and not just say, oh, I have to make so much more revenue this month or whatever. So I think KPI oriented thinking is in the way, right? It's just in the way of exploring and finding things. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that we have to have KPIs. Obviously, we can't go around it. But it stands in the way.
Just say we should have impact. Our work, our life should have impact, and we should try to thrive for impact. And that might be different things for different people, but still, as a university, as a normal organization, you want to have impact in a certain way.
You're right.
You have to think about how you could have impact.
You're right, and I'm the word impact is just like the word performance, or it's terrible. And the other word that annoys me about KPI is the indicator, right? It's like, here's the needle needs to point there. This is what you're saying, right? But listen, I have this one student who's now looking at who's going from college straight into to become a safety engineer, and he can't code. He can't code, and he doesn't even care to. He doesn't even hide it that he can't, right? He just says it doesn't interest me, but I'm really great with Petri nets. So and right, and that makes him a good safety engineer. And why? But he knows how troublesome programming is, but he just can't get the needle beyond this one indication. So and the word indicator or impact is just like performance, right? You're measuring something. Impact is a very male word, right? It's very forceful. And one of the words that I try when I talk to important people, not unlike your fine selves, is that I'm trying to talk about value, right? Because the word value, in my opinion, does exactly what you're suggesting. On the one hand, it bridges the gap between all those business people, right? Who, when they hear value, they hear money and profit, and fine, let them think that. But when I talk about value, I mean, what makes me happy, right? Why am I here as a professor at this tiny, university that is, the reason is because it is such a great place to be, and it's such a great it's for me a lot of value, and it gives me value to instill certain opportunities to my students, who then go out and find and do value for themselves and for the world. So why must it be an indicator, and why must it be an impact? Why can't it be a value that we teach?
May I again? When I run some courses in software engineering projects and ICT projects courses, and when we start up those courses, you make something that we call a project definition. You try to do the definition of the project that you are going into, and one parameter I want them to have concerns about when they define the project is actually those sustainability aspects. And then I mean all these 71 aspects of sustainability that the UN has proposed, and which are a guiding star concerning those issues. And when I go to other areas of engineering, for example, civil engineering, you can quite easily find papers, scientific papers about how to deal with sustainability aspects in constructing projects and so on. But if you do the same thing concerning software engineering projects, you don't find any. Strange, you can't, because what I would like to give my students is, okay, if you have this concern in your project concerning sustainability aspects, and you want to define how to handle those issues before you start up the project, please read those articles, read those papers. You can do pinpoint, you can show them those papers in other areas, but when you come to software engineering, I have been looking around, searching, and if you have any tip of good articles in those areas, I would likely very much have them, because I would directly send them further to my students. And I think this is an area we need to do research in. And I mean, there is a lot of things that we should come up with. I guess a lot of areas where you could write papers and do research, which could be directly useful for our students who has great concerns in those questions and how to contribute.
I'm just thinking back when I was doing my master's studies, and I was not in computer science, but one of the projects I actually ended up working on with a professor was environmental impact statements for civil engineers. And they were actually doing both physical environment and social environment. And that was back a number of years. And you're right, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in the software world. I guess we're just dealing with bits, so it doesn't matter, right?
Except we don't, right? We're not just dealing with bits. If we were just to deal with bits, we were computer science. No, it would be assembly people. We're software engineering is socio-technical.
Oh yes. I mean,
we're dealing with everything in society because computers drive everything in society. We're dealing with power and energy because power and energy drive the computers. And we're dealing with materials that are in limited resource because computers need those materials. I mean, in so many ways, you know, resources are critical, and our systems control resources. And
Interesting. Oh, wow.
So how do we research that? Where do we start?
Well, Christopher tossed in software research into values. So.
Yeah, so essentially there's a number of people that are researching software engineers' values in their work in the industry and so on. I just threw in a couple of links just to get people started if they wanted to even look at it. I was merely flagging that some of this does exist.
Yeah, good.
Well, that's good.
So maybe we can write some papers for next year's conference on some of this stuff and reviews or something like that. It's stimulating. It's stimulating to think about.
Sure. Wow. Okay. We're coming up on, we've got about a half hour left.
We don't need to use it.
Yeah.
If we run out of ideas, we can say, okay,
Yeah, that's true. We don't need to, but if well, yesterday we did summations of some sort. And I think Axel's raising his hand. I can't tell if people are raising their hand or scratching the background.
Oh, I'm raising. I was raising my hand, yeah. I would like to focus on a more low-level issue. In these first talks of Timothy and Daniel, it was already mentioned that we have skills on different levels, and there are things that we don't teach yet, and like judgment and so on. And I think we have to perform a kind of shift in our low-level teaching. We must perform more self-oriented and self-organized learning. And as Timothy mentioned, the students have to learn that. I think we have to also to focus on that from the beginning and the first courses, first semester, that students are able to learn several things by themselves. And I think what they can learn by themselves are the low-level cognitive stuffs, like learn the syntax of the programming language and the easy algorithm stuff. And when it comes to material that requires higher cognitive levels, that's what we have to need the common time for. So with common time, I think synchronous phases you may perform online, like in these Corona days, or in the lecture room or in the laboratory. And there are two things: we have to prepare our students for self-learning, and we also have to research of how we can do that, and also how self-learn material must look like. What must it look like, and how do we have to organize it, like all these intelligent tutoring systems or whatever. And then we get more space and time to concentrate together with the teacher on the higher cognitive stuff. And I think there's some research to be done in this area. So how far is self-learning and self-regulated learning available at your institutions? Do your students deal with self-learning phases, self-learning material, and does it work well? And okay.
Well, I think at least in the, well, I almost said at least in the United States, but it just occurred to me I don't really speak for the United States, right? But in this little microcosm that is roughly around me here, the whole idea of self-learning and project, or more generally speaking, problem-oriented instruction is very important to us. No one really does any frontal lecturing anymore, and if they do, then for a very good reason. And I suppose, and it goes even so deeply that something that I mentioned the other day that is not really common in Europe is the ABIT accreditation, which is an accreditation agency that accredits engineering programs, including software engineering. And one of their learning outcomes, I think that doesn't matter which one, but one of the learning outcomes is lifelong learning. So we have to actually assess in our students to maintain accreditation. How do we enable them to learn for the whole life? Good luck assessing that, other than dragging them back to and having them fill out a survey. It's like virtually impossible to really assess that. But they make us, and we do, and our curriculum has to enable that. Right?
Okay, then you are much more advanced than, for example, my institution is.
I'm not sure if I wouldn't use the word more advanced. I would say a different approach, or a different value, perhaps. Or maybe not different, because your institution is realizing that too. So it's really the same. We just had a little bit more time to think about it, maybe.
Of course, bringing up the accreditation and so forth points up that if we want something to change, we need to measure it. if we want, so if you want lifelong learning to be taught, you have to measure that is it happening or not. So
then we're getting back to measurement thinking again. And
I'm sorry.
it's true that people say you have to be able to measure. Measurement, I think, is useful in many contexts, but I also think that some kind of intuition that, yes, I am continuing to learn, I am good at it, and my students clearly know how to do it, may be possible without necessarily measuring it always. Just saying.
Sure.
I might suggest that maybe it's not so much about lifelong learning in that in that having the confidence and the skill to learn on their own and understand the value and importance of that and put that into the sort of their every, their continuing practice. So, I mean, this is something that I emphasize quite a bit with my students, is because we just don't have enough time to they'll never learn enough in the class. They'll never know enough to be really successful. The only thing that they can do is learn how to learn more efficiently and effectively, and also start to maybe enjoy it, which is not always such an easy thing to impart when they're struggling with the kinds of performance measures that we put in front of them. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking that it's not so much lifelong learning, it's sort of instilling their ability and confidence in to seek out on their own what they need and recognize when they need to do it and how to go about it. Like I said, it's something that to me it's a natural part of what we have to do, because we don't have enough time to teach them everything possible. They're going to have to go figure out. Sometimes they'll just have to learn some new framework or understand how a component works, or learn a new programming language as they need to. And I don't know. That's my thoughts. I think it should be an inherent and integral part of everything we do.
Yeah.
The idea of putting them on the path, not necessarily trying to give them, and measure them against the entirety of it.
That's right. And putting them on a path and giving them the tools to be inquisitive and to find that out, right? So my proudest moment in every class is, and you may have noticed that about myself, I'm a very strongly opinionated person, and and I am like that in class too, of course. And but my proudest moment every semester, and especially in my requirements class or in my software design class, my proudest moment for me is always when I say, okay, this is how I think how you should do it, and they said, no, we disagree, right? When they say, Bastian, you're wrong. And they have very thought out arguments, and I'm just sitting down, shutting up, because who am I to disagree?
I think it's, if they say you're wrong and you disagree, that's also good. It stimulates the thinking, and you may not agree, but
so sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. Depends on.
Yeah.
But no, it's the idea is that they have I guess what I'm aiming at is that they and these are undergrads. I mean, a primarily undergraduate institution. They're in their junior years. They're sometimes in their sophomore years even, and it's not in their nature to disagree with a professor. It's not in their nature to question. They are and I can tell, and especially in my software engineering class is a first semester junior type class. And at the beginning of the class, they sit there and they're waiting for knowledge to be and like, I don't have that, I can't just beam. I don't have wisdom, I just have tools, and here are some of them. And at the end of the semester, they're on their way, maybe not there yet, but they are at least on their way to transition towards the professional, where they, every once in a while they say, yeah, I'm not sure this is the best way, Bastian, here's something else. And this is when you can start disagreeing, right? And only disagreement makes you better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find my students are always a bit surprised when I start pointing out to them what I'm trying to do and the fact that I cannot just take my brain and put it in their head. We're going to have to go through a process where I show you some things and you try some things and we talk about it. And maybe by the end of things, you'll be doing some questioning and teaching of me. And they're always kind of, what are you talking about? But I try to point out to them the learning process that's going on. And it's always kind of exciting to see them wake up to, oh, that's what's happening when we sit in a classroom.
I don't know how you guys feel about this or have observed this, but I've noticed that there's been in my students especially quite a dramatic shift in how they are doing things and their confidence. So a lot about this, about not disagreeing and things like that, I found seems to boil down to just lack of confidence in their own abilities to think critically or to solve problems or to even originate something. And it's gotten so bad that and I don't know how to fight this. This would be some interesting research too, I suppose, how to fight the sort of the Google solution to everything. So like, even when I'm teaching basic programming, the students' first go-to is not to try to just figure it out themselves. They will Google it. They will spend hours and hours and hours searching for solutions to something that, of course, they wouldn't even recognize it if they saw it, which is the bad thing. And despite telling them that that's not a good way to do it, they lack the confidence to really just dive in and try it for themselves. They much rather defer to not just the professor, but to whatever they can find out there. Combating that, I think, is a huge challenge.
Daniel, so I somewhat agree and somewhat disagree. So in my experiences, when you have a load of students and they're raising questions, they will immediately come to me and start asking questions, and I want to, on many occasions, tell them that is the most simple question ever. Have you even done a Google first? And so there's possibly a balance to be had in that.
Yes.
Well, I agree. I see that too, and I do that too. Of course, I encourage them, but I mean, there's a difference. There's a difference between recognizing something that is clearly something they need to work through themselves and something they're probably not going to ever be able to find. And like I said, most of the time, even if there is a solution out there that they could find, they wouldn't even recognize it because they haven't, because if they had gone through the process of thinking about it enough where they could recognize a solution, they probably would have come up with one themselves already. Yeah. So, what I'm saying? So yeah, of course, there's a lot of what you're saying too, which is just like, that's something you should just Google, and go look it up. But I'm talking about something kind of a qualitatively different than just finding some basic information or, RTFM, as we call it. It's really the substitute for the thinking and the problem solving is now has become searching. And one would never think of that. I mean, I don't think it's almost like unheard of for how could we, software engineering, like you can't Google your answers. You can be inspired by things, but and I this is just something that I find very difficult. There's just much more. I think they're much more comfortable and lack confidence. Yeah.
It used to be read, learn, and inwardly digest. Now it's put search in front of that. Search, read, learn, and inwardly digest. There are students who search, see the result on the screen, and say, "I don't know the answer," because they don't bother to read the stuff that they get when they Google search.
Yep.
And they certainly don't inwardly digest it.
I don't know. I get the lovely, search, don't understand what you're getting, copy paste.
Yep, absolutely.
And then ask me, why doesn't this work?
Yeah.
and then I always ask, where did you get this from? Can you just give me the URL where you stole this? So maybe I can answer your question why it doesn't work.
Well, 20 years ago, it was a bit different. There were other students writing their programs for their friends, and then the friends are putting in the programs, and then we try to ask them, why did you do it that way, and what about the documentation? And they say, oh, they didn't do it for me, so why should I know that? So that's quite another level, you know. The other one was without Google, and now it's with Google, and it's easier. You don't need a friend; you need friend Google.
I have to say that the one thing we tried that I don't know how well it worked is we tried giving them little programming assignments that they had to do in class, with the network off. So, they couldn't Google things. They were timed. You get 10 minutes to do this. Of course, it just terrified the students. They literally, I've had tears and students shaking, and I can't do it anymore because it's just so, they just can't handle it. But that's how bad it is. Their lack of confidence is so bad that even if we gave them training sessions beforehand and then had them try to do this, it was just
you're right. It's a nightmare. I have a similar experience. I think I mentioned this the other day too to someone where I'm now in the position where for our information science capstone seminar, we have to assess critical thinking. And there's exactly 2 learning outcomes I need to know. One of them is I already forgot, it was meaningless. And the second one is something like we didn't define them, someone else defined them for us. So that's why I'm saying the first one is, it's a thing, it exists. The second one is solicit information from multiple sources. And that's basically, Google. So we teach Google.
I guess that's multiple sources.
Well, it's right in the context of information science. I guess it means Google, and it also means integrating databases and things like that, of course. But
Bastian, do you have the experience that even Googling is not done really well?
Oh yeah, terrible. It's in fact, my friends and I have this running gag where we say I have very poor Google food today.
Then probably we should really try to help them going through our thinking process, how to write a sensible Google question. I think it's an important skill nowadays to have.
Yes.
This is not something bad. It's really important.
So the problem that, especially one of the things that we struggle with is that, they I think they're fine Googling. They can do that most of the time, and they grew up with it, right? The students that I have in my class right now, they're younger than Google, and right, that just aged us. And I just see a lot of faces going like that at the same time. But the problem that I'm experiencing is that they're becoming less critical. And which is why it is so important, and which is why the powers that be told us here, Bastian, you need to assess this now in your capstone, is because others see the decline in critical thinking too. So it's not about asking a Google question. They're just fine Googling. It's about taking value out of what they find, right, and not going for the first Instagram post with someone showed some C code because they're proud. And is that even a thing? Do people do that? I don't know. But they're going for the easiest and first answer rather than the right one, and rather than for the one that works best for them.
Or learning how to just be inspired. That I tell them it's fine to Google. I said, but you have to understand you get what you pay for on that one, and you're not paying very much for this, and you're not going to get very much for it. I said, you might be inspired, but I said, when you just copy the code from somewhere you saw and you didn't really take the time to go through it and understand what it is, I mean, you're taking all their bad design and which may not be appropriate for what you're doing, and all the bugs that come along with it, and everything. And my students just tend to have to learn that the hard way. So I tell them, I encourage them. I say, go out, go find your dancers out there. Yeah, knock yourself out. I said, you're going to just be frustrated because you'll spend an awful lot of time and it basically won't work. And if you do manage to get something that works, you're going to get a bad grade on it because it's probably not right.
Yeah. But it's also the nature of software construction has changed, right? And I was talking about that with a student not too long ago when he said to me, oh my God, I can't even imagine having to do, what were we specifically talking about? I think it was a build system or Maven or something like that. Oh my God, I can't even imagine having to do the things that Maven do all by myself. And I said, listen, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we did software did a different thing and we didn't need that. We'd had different challenges. So these days the challenge, I guess, becomes, okay, from this wealth of working code out there, how can we get bits and pieces, not just on library level, but even on, I don't know, method level or statement level that, produce value in a new way.
Well, I often argue with my colleagues about this too. And I think Rick Kaseman is my only colleague who agrees with me on this. That, as you said, the nature of software development has changed quite dramatically. It's all components and frameworks and libraries and gluing stuff together. And most code is not written from the ground up. We don't have greenfield systems anymore. Everything is all integrated. And most of my colleagues are still stuck in the 20th century. I had to really argue with them that JavaScript was actually the right language that we should be using now. They're like, JavaScript, that's just a scripting crap language. You can't use that. That's the toy. That's nothing. Yeah.
The thing is, though, I cringingly agree.
Yeah.
It's a terrible language, but that's all signs point to terrible.
Hey, no judgments on. Well, I personally think JavaScript has come a hell of a long way. It's evolved and matured a lot. But the fact of the matter is,
sure,
that is the now and the future.
Use TypeScript. Come on.
Yeah. What?
Not JavaScript. Use TypeScript. We try to convert every client to TypeScript
whatever
because it's really a difference.
Whatever variant floats your boat. But the point is,
don't use Lisp, use Clojure.
Right, Clojure, Eiffel. But the idea that programming is based on it's no longer this ground up endeavor, and engineering applications are all about just making use of frameworks and existing components and integrating and things like that. And there's just it's a very different way of thinking. Using microservices and all that kind of stuff, and it's hard to teach. It's really that's for sure.
But the real world now is connected by JavaScript. You are just right. It's Python and JavaScript nowadays.
Yeah, it is, man, and it's going to just get more and more like that.
In most other areas, I see Python more because of the physics. We have a lot of physics with a PhD, and they all do Python because they
love their Python.
The good libraries.
So I think it's like saying, what do you like better? A screwdriver or a hammer? Listen, it's like, do you in developing a safety critical system? Yes. Well, you're not using Python or JavaScript, that's for sure. So I think it's a tool thing, right?
Yeah.
This is a toolbox.
Yeah.
Well, lots of work to be done, folks, for us. Ever mounting challenges.
Well, we are almost running out of time, but before we close this session, I just heard that Mike will not be able to attend the closing session because he deserves some sleep, and he is now, oops, he vanished.
Oh.
I hope he will come here again, because he was already away for a couple of minutes before. He has some connectivity problems. And well, I hope he he comes back, because we have quite a surprise for him, and so he should be here. So I hope he will join us.
This is most unfortunate.
Yes, it was about 2 minutes, so I hope he will come and join us. So well, just you can go ahead with the discussion, and then I will just try to come up with this the thing we wanna tell you, and especially Mike from the PC chairs. Just go ahead. I'm sure he will try to come again. Yeah, here it's coming.
There he is.
He's coming. He's coming. Okay.
You're like a radio host, you know. So, oh no, the guest isn't there yet, so I'll have to do a break moderation.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. I see you have problems with the connection to Zoom. Are you here again? Hello?
He appears frozen.
Yeah, but I think that's just common the first time when you joined Zoom. It happens also with me. Mike?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? If yes, maybe you put it in the chat, because your picture is frozen.
Seems to have gone again.
That's what you get for using your cell phone for your internet access.
It might be run out of power, or gets into low power mode at the end of the
battery rundown, or use Bluetooth or something. Well, you are recording it. You could just go ahead and, like he was here, and then play the recording.
Let's see. Maybe it comes again. If not, we just have to do that anyway. But then he could also see the recording of during the closing, from the closing session. So
somebody tried to connect to him with the with chat or anything like that. Don't know if he's on Slack.
He was on Slack earlier when the first problem occurred, but now I can't see him. Well, yes, he's here. He's on Slack.
Give him a Slack message just to get him to come back. He might have just said, "Oh, I don't need to. I'm going to be gone." But
I might have his phone number. Maybe you can text him. Alternate channel.
Oh,
there
hi,
he
Mike.
is.
Oh. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Oh no! Keeps coming and going.
You're muted. Your phone, your microphone is muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes,
Mike, we want to tell you something. Okay, Marian, go ahead. Until we lose him anymore again. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
Well, Marian, what shall we do?
Michael, are you still there? Can you type something into the chat? We're trying to communicate with you. If you can hear us, chat something. No, he's gone.
Gone.
Oh, this is just so sad.
Okay, so that's sad. Okay. So what should we do, Marian? Should we do it in the closing session?
I guess everyone is now
Curious, and then we come to the closing session.
Or do it twice in case, just, oh, he's trying to come back again now.
We tried just to say we had, and as you know, we
Mike is here.
very, very much support from the program committee, and we were very happy with all the support, with all the reviews being written, but there were some reviewers that were outstanding in every perspective, that where really every review was very detailed, very long, very helpful for the authors. And Mike was one of these, and as he cannot join for the evening session, we want to take the opportunity to announce that we want to award Mike the Distinguished Reviewer Award, and this is one of 3 reviewer awards. So for the others, please stay tuned till the closing session. And Mike, if you can hear us, thank you very, very much for your effort and all what you've done on the PC. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My gosh.
Thank you.
Super. All right. So I guess we're near the end of this session. Been very from my perspective, although I was the first speaker, I learned a lot.
Appreciate it very much.
So thanks a lot for everybody.
Thank you very much. It was great.
It was definitely stimulating enough to keep me awake.
Yes.
Good.
Good night, then.
Okay.
Aloha.
Good. Aloha and good night to all
Good
those who are
night.
going to sleep now. And the next sessions to begin the same
Bye.
Zoom link.
So good night. Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Good morning, whatever. Yes.
All right.
Okay. Everybody's leaving. Yeah.
Well, that was quite a challenge to get you back here in time, just that you have the possibility to see it. What
Yes.
are the problems?
I'm not sure. My network suddenly started bouncing. It usually is pretty solid, but I'm suspicious. I heard the microwave turn on in the other room, and I'm kind of
that'll
suspicious.
do it.
Well, thank you very much, and Mike, thank you very much for your 2 panels. Great
Okay,
work.
thank you
And
so much.
as I know you, you will sum up all these things, and
I'll try. I need to find the video. Oh, I did find it. That's right. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It may be next week before I get there, though.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay.
It was a pleasure to have you here with the two panels. Thank you.
Yes. Great. And thank you, Timothy. Yay. And Dan. I know Dan's already gone. Marion and Bastian and everybody. Appreciate it very much. Gerhard. Yay. Axel. Yay. Appreciate it all. Okay.
Okay.
It looks like somebody's coming back. Somebody's connecting.
Yeah, because the next session is about to start, right?
Aha. Okay. So
In the very same room too, so you might as well stick around and enjoy the next session.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go eat. I've got dinner waiting.
Judging by microwave sounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good to see you,
Give my
Mike. Take it
regards to
easy.
Mexico.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So we're waiting for our session chair, Vera, to join us. Just some connection issues here and there. Maybe I'll just send her the direct Zoom link.
I've tried that.
I must say I've been looking forward to this session by far among the most. So I'm very keen on hearing, seeing, witnessing all the brilliance that you've come up with. Waiting for Vera to join.
There she is.
Here we go. Hey Vera, how's it going?
Yeah, okay. I can I log in my cell phone. It's okay. For me, it's good morning.
Well, good morning to you too. So, whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away. can wait a
Okay,
little
thank
while
you.
longer, but I think also everyone seems to be here. At least the important people are here. And then some people who just like to listen.
I have just to see who is the first one. Okay, now I'm getting. Oh, sorry everyone, because I was a little worried because I couldn't get in to the. Okay, I'm now. So we are going to start the sections ad hoc, distance teaching. And the first one is the paper online delivery of intensive software engineer education during the COVID-19 pandemic. Who is there? Is Matthew Barr?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, so let's start.
Are you going to show the slide, or we don't need to? That's fine. It's fine. So hi, I'm Matt. One of my co-authors, Wakar, is also here. We're going to be discussing this for a later paper. So just to give you the pitch, this is an experience report. What happened on our program is we have it's a work-based program, an apprenticeship. And the way we've structured that is a little bit more like the approach, the Duales Studium approach in Germany, where we have intensive teaching blocks, where the students are with us rather than being in the workplace and coming to us for a day a week. So we have quite an intensive teaching block of 8 weeks per semester. And as it happened, the lockdown kicked in 1 week into that intensive teaching block in March. So the three of us who were teaching at the time, myself, Wakar, and Derek, had to very quickly adapt with no prior planning to delivering daily teaching for the remaining 7 weeks. So the three courses that we're running were practical algorithms, which was Wakar's, and we had my web application design. Bit of echo there. I don't know if someone's got their speaker on. And the third and final course or module was the testing and software improvement module. So we were obviously flying by the seat of our pants a little bit. We hadn't had time to prepare, but we think we got away with it. We did a couple of different things that you would expect. You know, we chunked the lectures up into smaller sections. We put a lot of thought and effort into how the breakout groups would work. So for example, on my course, on the web course, I kind of handcrafted the groups because we had the advantage of knowing the students. They'd been with us for the previous semester. So I knew their abilities, their personalities, and I was able to make sure that there was someone in each of the breakout groups that could lead and guide the rest of the team. So that was one thing that we did. I think the rest of it is in the paper. I'm sure you all read the paper. And I think, is it just questions now? Is that right?
Well, there should be a discussant who was assigned to this.
It's me. Hello.
Oh, hi.
I'm Malte, and I read your paper and also looked on it. It's really nicely written, and I liked your report very much. Also, that you're focusing on that you need different teaching interactions to make things available online, and that you cannot just make anything synchronously online as you would do it in presence. I like stressing out this point of online lecture. What I'm curious about is if I have a look on figure 1, then you report the effectiveness of face-to-face learning against pre-recorded lessons, and then like the inverted classroom model, just that you do the inverted classroom online. And it turns out that your students in general say it's a little bit more effective to run this pre-recorded videos with the live tutorial against face-to-face sessions in the lecture. So what does this tell you for the future? Are you going to stick with this inverted classroom model, or do you go back to face-to-face sessions next iteration?
So we're in luck here, because the lecturer responsible for that course, and that indeed figure 1 is Waqar, and he's on the call. Take it on. You want to field that one?
Right. So yeah, I'm the guy who messed up the time zone yesterday and missed that session. So you can ask me questions about the other paper as well. But anyway, so yes, that's actually a very interesting observation. I was listening to somebody the other day, and it seems like a lot of people have had this epiphany that recorded lectures are actually probably the way we should have been doing things even before the pandemic. For me, certainly it was almost a revelation that it just makes a lot more sense to do the recorded lectures online. So, and you can see over there when I moved to doing the live lectures, and I did it live online straight away because I just made the switch. So, okay, instead of doing face-to-face, just do the exact same thing, but only on Zoom. And that was exhausting for me. It was exhausting for the students. I had a peer observer who noted that you are basically recording a lecture because it's a monologue. Everybody had their cameras off, their mics off. And I was talking to the screen, and she suggested, why not record it and put it up online and do something more interactive when you are actually there together in that room. And I think that was a very valuable suggestion. And you can see that in that graph over there as well. So I don't see myself going back to live lectures exactly the way they were before. I miss the lives. I miss the interaction of face-to-face and in-person classrooms for tutorial type sessions, for group activities. I think there is something we are losing by not being able to do that in person, face-to-face. But as for the direct instruction part of thing, especially for a course like mine, I think the nature of the course in some part dictates that too, because it was a theoretical course. It was a first introduction to for the students to a somewhat theoretical subject, algorithm, discrete maths. So I think they just like the opportunity to pause, rewind, or if I'm too slow, put me on 2x or 1.5x, whatever works for them. I just found that it worked really well for them. And I see myself continuing this for the kind of courses I teach. But I'll just kind of give a couple of points about other perspectives as well that I have heard people talk about, is that in some courses, I think just being face-to-face makes more sense, maybe more interactive, there are more group activities. Some people I've heard that they just like to be in the room. And somebody said that I like to be able to see the whites of people's eyeballs when I'm teaching. So to get a sense, so some people are, I think, really good at reading the room, responding to the room, being very on their feet. So I think for them, I would say the very high performers in-person classrooms, I think they might be missing out in this format. But for mere mortals like myself, I think I found that recording my lectures with a heavy technical content, putting them online, having people be able to have the subtitles over there as well, and so everything, I think that really worked well. And I don't think I'll be going back to the pre-pandemic normal after maybe the next summer, hopefully.
So that's quite interesting, because obviously Waqar and I were teaching at the same time, and but my style, I don't think it's better. I think Waqar is being kind, but my style tends to be quite interactive anyway, and a little bit sort of, I don't want to say making it up as I go along. I mean being reactive, and reading the room and changing direction. And I to be honest, I struggle with that online, because I'm one of those people that likes to see people and read the room and change tack. So, and I tend to sprinkle, again, my courses, the course I was talking about here in the paper, the web course and the course I'm teaching at the moment, are not as theory-based as Waqar's stuff. There's a lot of maths, a lot of discrete maths and so on in Waqar's material, which probably does lend itself to more instructive formats. Whereas I it's not for me. It's just as an educator, as a teacher, I don't enjoy delivering monologues. So.
I would have one more question. You described that when you split, I think it's in the testing and software improvement class, you split the team into smaller groups, and then you ask them to create 2 chat rooms so that they have one to interact between them and get on chatting, and the other one for instructions from the teachers and the teaching assistants, would you keep that in the future, or do you miss out like all the social shadowing in groups you normally can observe in rooms, and you would prefer to see that as well to get a better understanding on not just the progress of the complete group, but also the individuals in the group?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question, because that was Derek, the third of the lecturers, and I don't think Waqar and I did that same thing. I think Derek liked it and he's continuing with it. It worked for him. I prefer to get, kind of what I was saying a minute ago, I prefer to get in there with the students and see what's going on. And one of the benefits of me being able to go into the breakout groups is that they're more likely to have their cameras on, I've noticed, and I can actually get a little bit more of the interaction that I'm looking for, because in the large lecture, it's like Waqar says, it's just cameras off, you know. Yeah. But when I jump in, I sort of tend to move around their little teams and sort of see how they're getting on, much like I would have done walking around the classroom. And they do seem a little bit more interactive and engaged in those. So I certainly would miss that capacity. That said, I do set up a private channel for them, just and it's persistent, and they can dive on there if they really want to talk about something that they don't want me to see. You know, maybe just saying how bad my lecture is, for example. But you know, I think I'd rather it was. Maybe I'm being I'm probably clinging to the old ways a little bit too much, but I want to try and mirror what I get in the classroom as much as possible, and that means me being here in amongst the conversation and picking up on misconceptions or problems. So I'd rather not be excluded, but maybe that's just my personality.
Thank you. Are there any more questions in the room?
Just a small remark on our side. We have lots of interactive learning in our company. And what we found out that certain things work better when you're online. For example, in workshops, that you can have breakout rooms, for example, in Zoom, and people can work around in the breakout rooms. It was a quite recent addition to Zoom. And then you can really be in a group for a few minutes or a few seconds, and people can walk around. It's really helpful. And also screen sharing works much better than in real life. So there are certain aspects that you can embrace and make better. And of course, you have some other things that are not working. And that is, for example, discussions in large groups. So if you really want to have some interaction, you have to create small groups. That's the reason why, for example, the breakout rooms or the networking rooms in this virtual office are so small. After 7 people, you'll get a new room. Just to embrace that. Yeah? So you have to think about what will work online and what will work offline in a certain different way. And we all make new experiences. And we just have to rework quite a bit of what we have done in the past. And that's just the new normal.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that at all. And I think that's fair. Actually, I found the Zoom breakout rooms to be fairly useless. Certainly at that time in March, there wasn't the functionality you could get in Teams. So
nowadays it's a few weeks old, the feature that you can move between Zoom rooms at will.
Yes, I know, but I mean the things like the screen sharing and so on, that simply wasn't there. So that's why I used Teams. Actually, I quite liked having Teams separate from Zoom. I meant I kept the Zoom call open, so I was always there. You didn't lose that connection with people. So they just muted themselves on Zoom and then went into those Teams, which gave them all of that. They could dive on a call and do screen sharing and stuff, which wasn't at the time in Zoom. So I think that worked really well.
I think Bernd also had a question, if time permits.
Yes, thank you. A somewhat generic question. What is your favorite lesson learned? Like, if I knew that before, on technology, on microphones, on cameras, on interaction in the online situation, what is your favorite lesson learned?
I mean, it's quite a mundane answer, I suppose, but I realize the limits that people can concentrate online are much less. So obviously, we all know that we're supposed to chunk up the learning into smaller sections, but really I needed to build in breaks and make the students switch off because we were all getting exhausted. It seems so obvious now, especially after 6 months or however many months it is. But at the start, I didn't quite appreciate that the 2-hour sessions that we have are extremely tiring. So maybe that's my answer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt the discussion right here, but papers we hand over to Australia next.
Thank you, Matthew, for your speech. And it's very hard in Brazil also to have to have classes away, and we have lots of students, so it's hard. And I prefer to also to have a class not in a distance, or really a distance in another in another environment. So your experience is very good to share. So. Use a Zoom, or you use another environment to give your classes?
Was that a question to me, or?
Oh, it's the questions. Yeah, yeah, and I think we have to. I'm a little lost. If you, Marian, can help me,
Yeah.
I think we have to go on to another presentation.
Right. I think next will. Sorry.
Yeah,
his name wrong.
Is adapting teaching of software engineer course to COVID is Tanitra. Sorry,
yes, that's me. That's fine. Yeah. I'm Tanzila. So if you're happy, I can start. Tanzila, yeah, it's a sub-J. Sorry, I don't know why my parents wrote it like that. So I have been carrying it like Tanzila.
Yeah, I think you can start.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, we can. I am Tanzila. I work as research fellow in a humanized lab in Monash University, which is in Australia. I also work as academic tutor in Swinburne University, which is also in Melbourne, Australia. So I'm sharing my experience of teaching a course. The course is mainly kind of related to networking, data communication, and security. However, that is delivered to a very wide student cohort. So first of all, this was both undergraduate and postgraduate students. And that was offered to students who were doing normal Bachelor of Computer Science, but majoring in software engineering. People who were doing Bachelor on Engineering, but majoring on robotics and things like that. So you can imagine the cohort is quite a mix of wide background skills and knowledges. This course has been offered for a few years now, and it is actually designed to deliver in on-campus format, in a face-to-face teaching format. The main concept of this course is to introduce students with the very fundamental knowledge of network architecture, especially the protocol stack, and introduce them with the protocols used and the functionality of each of the layer in the network. And then the second part of this course is related to security. So some possible threats that we have that can attack our networks, and introducing them with some measures that they can apply to mitigate those threats. For example, encryption, different type of encryptions, and some other issues that they can use to get rid of that threats. First 3 weeks was delivered as usual, and it was going really smoothly. And then suddenly, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, whole Victoria actually went down in a stage 4 restriction. And what that meant was all the campuses were closed. University took a decision that we will take a pause for 1 week. So no teaching and learning activity will take place during that week. And then we resumed teaching as week 4 from week 5 onwards, but we count it as week 4. So first thing, I will tell my experiences as a story, because not everything was perfect, but we learned a lot and tried to address those challenges that we faced one after another. So the first thing was when we paused teaching and learning activities, there was a university-wide announcement came to all the students that we will no longer deliver any on-campus teaching. And we are taking 1 week pause just to prepare our courses to be delivered in online format. And respective teachers will clarify how they want to proceed with their courses. During that week, so I was teaching this one, I had to prepare what will we do about the lectures, about the labs and everything. And this is very hands-on type of course, because you have to do the networking things, capturing network traces and analyzing things in the lab. So there was quite a bit of challenging thing, how to transition this whole course for an online format. So all those instructions, how we would run this course, came after 1 week, just the starting of week 4 for the students. And what we realized, there was an internal survey with the students just to see that whether they were happy with this online delivery or not. And what we saw that they said that transition of 1 week was really stressful for them. That's because they expected the teacher to clarify things earlier, as soon as the university said that we're going to have a pause for 1 week. So first lesson learned is that while I was preparing this course for online delivery, I should have informed all the students through announcement or personal email that I'm preparing this course. So just stay tuned, we'll come back with updates. Now, the first challenge I faced when we were delivering this online is that it was really difficult to get in touch with the students. That was only email or announcement that actually sent emails to them. However, a lot of students just turn their notification off and they don't check it. So after a while, what I realized is that if I follow a regular pattern of announcements, students started checking their emails quite regularly and checking for new updates quite regularly. So soon we adopted a format that every Friday evening we'll come up with the to-do list for next week. Every Tuesday afternoon we'll have the reminder of the labs and things like that. Initially we started with full lecture videos. Students said those were bandwidth expensive, first of all, because they wanted to download some of these.
Again, but could you please come to an end, because we are running out of time.
Oh, okay, yes. I think I don't need to go through all the experiences, but just the main or the most important thing that I learned was that this course was especially, the way it was transitioned was especially helpful for software engineering students, because those first 3 weeks, what we did on campus, what we did was we instead of having all the software and environment in lab, we asked all, because the student cohort was quite diverse, we asked all of them to set up that environment, networking environment, on their own machines. And we found that this was really, really helpful, especially for software engineering students, because they did not have that background of setting up network and everything. So that helped a lot for this transition, along with some other lessons that we have learned. Thank you. I think we can go to the questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the overview. I was reading through your paper and I really enjoyed it. And
Thank
I
you.
found it especially interesting that your focus was so much on communication, especially with the first challenges that you've described. And I think this is really crucial. And I think something that we might miss a bit is that even though our teaching material might be great, if you don't communicate right and don't communicate early, it might not really be accessible to students, or the idea that the materials out there might not reach all students. So I found this really interesting. And my first question, maybe to get a bit of a setting here, how many students were actually part of the whole course, and how much, or with how many lab tutors were you working during that transition?
So I had around 60 students, and there was, along with myself, there was another tutor who used to do the labs. I did one lecture and lab.
Oh, amazing! So only you two handled the whole lecture. Nice.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Based on what I've read, because you've did the interesting way of actually assessing the students by doing those interactive ways that they presented you their solutions of their exercises instead of like testing them yourself. And if you do this with 60 students and only you two, I found this was probably taking a lot of time. So, but I think this is a general very interesting and good approach. The first thing maybe to go a bit further before that, before you go to the exercises. So you said you've chunked up your lecture into smaller parts to make it easy for the students to consume this. I was wondering, did you like drop any content as part of this process, or how did you decide on like how to chunk up a lecture in itself? And because like I expect like a normal lecture takes 1.5 hours or something like this, and you have like a lecture on the same topic. And so how was the process there? And yeah, once again, did you drop any content, or did you add anything during that process?
That's a really good point, actually. And not really. So the change, as you already know, the change was brought in place because some students said that the big lecture videos were bandwidth expensive, and they were struggling to keep motivated. So we decided that we'll keep those recordings, full lecture recordings. We'll use those from previous semester. And then I started doing smaller videos. So thankfully, due to the nature of this course, I could easily divide those on topics. So because what we do is we introduce them with the network fundamentals, and then we go layer by layer. So it actually has a general format. We introduce them with the functionality of the layer, and then we talk about different protocols of that layer, and then we go about security things. So I actually could divide it on those broad themes. And thankfully, I didn't have to actually drop out any topic. But there were a number of videos, like for 1 week's content, there are 4 or 5 videos.
Nice. That sounds like a reasonable approach. And for like, so you had lectures, you were split up you split it up into different smaller parts, and then of course you had the exercise or the interactive tutorial parts. So I was wondering, like, out of those 60 students, how many did actually really attend those lab sessions? And like, I think you even offered additional lab sessions based on if students had any problems. Like, how was the distribution there? Maybe also compared to like an in-person version of the course.
It was reduced. I should say that because when labs are compulsory, so usually labs are full when we do it on campus, but lecture is always like 30 to 40% student, because those are recorded in any way. So even if you do it on campus, so yeah, the participants or attendance in lectures has always been like that, 30 to 40%. However, when we started in online mode, you have noticed that first few weeks, like until week 6, we had a discussion session only. And that was driven by me. So I introduced them with the concept. It was more interactive session, but based on that week's content. And those were not popular at all. And I can remember one day I had only 5 students attending that one. But soon, when after week 6, we started those catch-up sessions, which were student-driven sessions. So we asked them to do their homework, come to this session, ask questions or confusions, and then I don't answer their questions directly. I just assign other students if they have any answer to it. So in that way, those were very interactive, and those were quite popular. We had around 20 to 30 students attending those sessions.
Nice. That's an interesting insight, actually, that like a student-driven content lecture might be more popular than if you try to offer it by yourself or try to bring the content to the students. That's nice. And maybe like a last question from my side. So maybe somebody else might also add something there. Like you talked a lot about communication, which you said in the beginning, which I really liked. Did you like forward any feedback about that to your university, or like did some of the communication strategy of the university change too, or was it just like that you realized by yourself that the communication needs to be better, but like it stayed within your own department or your own chair?
Actually, university actually did 3 surveys during that, and for a few of these surveys were actually based on asking feedback from students, how their course was going, whether they were happy with the format that we are following, and that was for each individual course, because we didn't have anything agreed upon. Every course was delivered differently. So that I'm sure those feedback went to the department, and they reviewed that one. So there were a lot of positive feedbacks on this online format. So that's why recently university is reviewing that some of these courses can actually be delivered online, or actually is more popular if they're delivered online. So as long as we forwarded our feedbacks and feedback came from the students, I think they are now reviewing that, how we can incorporate those feedback from now on.
Nice, great to hear.
Okay. Thank you, Tanisha and Paul.
Thank you
for your questions. I really like your paper, but I think we have to go to the next paper, Transitions to a Large Distributed Programming Course. Oh, it's from you, Paul. Yeah.
I'll directly take over then. Thanks. So I'll just shortly go over the content of the paper that we had in there. So as already said, we were taking a look at a large-scale distributed programming course, which at first was just normally done in a classroom setting in the course of in the span of like 2 weeks, where we teach students the Swift programming language and how to develop mobile applications for iPhones and iPads. And the course normally is a prerequisite for a practical capstone course that we have as part of our chair, where students develop small applications in teams of 5 to 6 students supported by somebody from the chair. And to get everybody up to speed in the beginning, we do this so-called Swift Bootcamp, which is a 2-week course where we put a lot of content, a lot of work to the students, and they have to attend lectures and do some homework. The course is normally taking place in a lecture hall where about 80 students plus tutors and instructors are all in the same lecture hall for a day during the whole 2 weeks. And after a lecture, the tutors stay around and help the students with the questions, and the students always have somebody around to ask all the time. But of course, due to the pandemic, putting 80 or plus students in one room, it wasn't really a great idea. So a few weeks before we actually started the course, we got the notes from the university that we should transition to an online format, and the paper really describes this transition. And we decided to do live stream sessions, so they were live streaming for the students, but students could pause them at any time. But instead of us sitting in front of a laptop during the session, we pre-recorded them so we could improve the content, cut out some mistakes, make the sessions a bit better in post-processing. And at the same time, students could ask questions while the session was live streaming in the chat platform. So if a student had a question, they could simply pause the live stream for them, ask a question, get some input, and then resume the live stream after the question has been answered. So students could watch the session at their own pace, but at the same time could always reach out to somebody who was there during the duration of the session to answer sessions immediately. So I think this was a really nice format for the students to do the sessions at their own pace and to ask questions without interrupting the experience for any other students who might be more an expert in some topics. And as part of the course, we also have homework corrections. So each student gets about 8 homework assignments to do during the 2-week period. And for this, we used a semi-automated code review bot, which helped us a lot, especially in the distributed setting of the course, where students pushed their homework to a Git repository. And we had automated feedback given by ReviewBot. And after the ReviewBot accepted the pull request, the tutors were reviewing the exercises, which was really nice for the real programming intensive homework that we were doing as part of this course. And the overall feedback of the students was very positive. We even got some improvements compared to the numbers we conducted or we asked in surveys from the previous semester. The students' general feedback was good, that the sessions were available online to watch later. The pace of the sessions was good, but of course some students hesitated to ask questions as part of the virtual setting, and we tried to improve those things in this version of the course that we just conducted a few weeks ago, which was also part of the future work of our paper at the end.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Okay, if the presenter or the discussant has no question, I would have a question. What it might be not particular to this course, but what we learned is that we do need more force in online learning. That originally we wanted to bring in the fun and do not that much assessments and to have not that much grading throughout the semester. But we experienced that then students tend to do nothing. We were forced to bring in more assessments in an online setting, and I was wondering if you made comparable experiences.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. So the nature of the course is that within the 2 weeks, there's a lot of content for the students to process, and for handing in 8 homework assignments, there's also a lot of work to do for the students. So we, even like an in-person version of the course, we've experienced that we need to remind the students that the homework deadline is coming up, and at the point of the homework deadline, they should not only have submitted their homework, but it should be approved by the automatic review system and the tutor. So the homework has to be in a good shape so to be accepted by us. And we had this similar experience in an in-person course where we had to remind students and had to let them know that the deadline is coming up and it might be a bit close for them to finish everything. And it was especially important, I think, in this virtual edition. And what we did is we always took a look at the current student progress, which was quite transparent for us because we used an issue tracker to assign tasks to the students. So we could always see if the student started working on a homework, if the student was in review for homework or how the review was going, because we could see all the feedback provided by the tutor. And therefore, we started contacting students even at the end of the first week to let them know that we think that they might be behind schedule, so that they might have already submitted 1 or 2 homework assignments, and tried to identify students who needed more help, and also let the tutors know that one of the students they were assigned to might need additional help. And I think with this approach of directly contacting the student on a one-to-one basis and letting the student know that we think that their progress might be behind, we got most of the students to finish the homework in time. And for some students, of course, even that pressure wasn't enough. So we did some extensions for the deadlines at the end for individual students, but in the end, we must say that we were successful, that almost all students could hand in all the homework. But this was our approach of like putting on some pressure. We were initially thinking about removing the lectures after the live stream to force the students to really watch the session during the live stream. But we got a lot of feedback from students that they would want to rewatch the sessions, and therefore we put them up again and made them public again for the students after the first day. And this might have dropped a bit of the attendance in the lecture, but I think it improved the overall experience for the students because they could rewatch the content anytime.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether Vera can see it.
It has more questions. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, one quick question, my generic question again. What is your favorite lesson learned on everything? Technology, virtual interaction. You named already some. Thank you for that one. What is your favorite?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that preparation really was key for this course. Is the biggest lesson that we've learned, and that to have a nice way for the students to experience this, communicating our expectations right before at the start of the course was really crucial for the success of the course. So in the beginning of the course, we have a single lecture that provides no content, but just sets all the different expectations. And this was always important for an in-person version of the course, but I think it was especially important for the virtual edition of the course. And in addition to us pushing the students, I think this was the biggest lesson learned, that communicating clearly at the beginning has the biggest impact on the success of the students at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. And we are going to the last one, teaching a project-based course at a safe distance, an experience report, Melt, who is going to, yeah, okay. Melt or Fake from the Dortmund University. Automate. They are there? I'm not seeing.
You're on mute, Malt.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm Malte, and I'm going to present you this paper, which is joint work with Falkova. And we had a hands-on project, which is a project-based course in the summer term, which with the title Formal Methods in IT Security. And we are basically interested in teaching a little bit about formal methods and formal method-based tools and how to use them for IT security analysis. And we planned this as a first-time course for the summer term, and while planning the course, we had to replan it as an online course completely. And we have identified like 3 key challenges and chances in this process I want to talk about shortly. One is one of the main challenges when you don't have the possibility to meet on campus is how you structure communication. You need to get an idea, especially as we teach a lot of new tools that are not very well documented. What are the questions students have? How do we get an insight on whether they make progress or whether they're just frustrated, similar to what Matthew said? You want to get an idea whether they like the new online formats or whether they feel completely lost, and we have to pick them up a little bit. So we have set up a chat parallel to the sessions, and we offered video consulting hours. So I just have been around for half an hour, and students could join me and ask whatever questions they have about the lecture or grading or general questions for education with our group. And then I think there are 2 points that are really important, mostly in the software engineering perspective. One is that we still want to allow practical experience in a remote setting. And as I said, I'm working on teaching IT security analysis, so I have to get a somehow protected environment, because I'm not allowed to just take any arbitrary IT security analysis tool and run it on the internet, and I cannot do that in teaching. So we had to look intensively into virtualization, how to build this virtual environment on the students' PCs and how to get that set up. But on the other side, by building this on their own machines instead of just using some predefined physical separated lab infrastructure, they learned a lot about virtualization, and students said it's really helpful for them to learn all the side skills that are not directly linked to the core teaching concepts, but which you have to do to get things running on your own. And I think long-term thinking, and eventually the industry people have taught on this as well, I think remote working and remote teaching has a chance for higher employability later, because we teach explicitly remote skills. So we teach how to work on a video conference, how to make sure that you set up online meetings efficiently. We lose a lot of this shadowing that's going on in presence on campus, but we need that to keep the learning group healthy somehow. So we learn how to use general communication chats. We learn how to talk about off-topic things also in work chats. And I think those are things we typically don't teach in presence on campus, but if we are forced to use more remote teaching, we have a chance to also get better training. We have to use pull requests the way they're mentioned to use, and we cannot just work on one machine and then people just commit some aggregated work at the end. Yeah, and therefore I think there's also a chance in these teaching formats, and I think even if university reopens and we're allowed to do presence teaching, I would split this course in a part for where we have to convey informations that we do in presence, and then there's a group project work in the second part, which should stay remote from my point of view, even in the long-term future. I'm welcoming any questions.
Thanks, Malte. Really enjoyed the paper actually, and I could see some, connections with what we were doing as well. I guess my first question would be, this was with 20 students, I believe. How do you think it would scale up, the approach you took, if you had more students?
I think it would scale up if you have more teaching assistants. So I've done this mostly myself, and then I have 20 students, and the complete course is designed at our university that it won't get more even in presence. So it's not supposed to scale actually, but you could scale it. I mean, this knowledge transfer, you could have more people watching videos. That's not so hard, but then you also need at some point a second person dealing with all this question coming up, supervising groups. So I think 20, maybe 30 students, that's what you can do with one person. And then if you get more people to do all the supervising stuff and helping them out with compiling things and getting things to work on their machines, at some points, you either have to get a way better engaging. So I've already seen that students help each other to set up things on their machines so that they can learn from each other, like you would do it in a company. So someone checks out new software and then one gets it running and someone else has a question and then they start interacting on how to get it running and how to set it up. But there are sometimes questions, at least in our case, as we use research tools that are not documented, so they have to ask us. And that's the limiting factor, more or less, for scaling those kinds of settings. And that's my personal opinion. I think we had this discussion earlier this morning that people coming from internships from industry, they eventually have experienced different feedbacks than if you're just at university. And I think peer feedback is great to get a lot of things solved, but peer feedback among students sometimes is missing a little bit more senior feedback, a little bit more senior people might have. So you cannot just replace teaching assistant feedback in all points with peer feedback among students.
Thank you. Well, that's brilliant. Waqar, do you want to?
Yeah, so I'm the discussant for the paper. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading the paper, very interesting. There's something which you suggest toward the end, which I found really fascinating, was that you said that even though you could give the students like VMs that work out of the box, but
Yes.
you're suggesting that we don't do that. So we give them like almost partial instructions and they hack their way into it, so to speak, with whatever system they have. And I completely see the utility of that, but do you think it might be distracting people from the key learning outcome, for example, one? And I think I can see at least some students who might be put off because of it. And they see the hurdle and say, okay, there's too much to do even before we get started. How do you see this?
Well, as I said, this is not a graded course, so I just have to make sure people make sufficient progress to allow them to pass the course. And I personally think if they make a lot of progress on tooling, because they haven't been very good at tooling at the beginning, and it's levels then in tooling, even if it keeps some people off track from the original learning incentives for formal methods and IT security, it's still valuable to their overall career. And I personally think it's important to teach students and make sure they have some hands-on experience, at least in software engineering education, on how to run a compiler, how to do eventually things Maven is doing for me, myself, to understand error messages and how to fix error messages. If I check out a somehow broken project that has been running 4 years ago on GitHub, and now I check it out and have a new Java version, I don't know, Maven spills out log on me, I have to understand and process what's happening in the log. And I think of course, I can package everything in lovely VMs and then they just use the tool, but then I keep them from the experience of seeing all this log outputs that might happen before that, or make all the experience. I mean, it's very nice if I know how to use all these operating systems and compilers to get the tool running, but I need my students to learn that because they need to do that on their project later, and they have to debug projects and they have to get an idea on where to start debugging. So I don't want to keep them from this experience. And if that means that some don't reach the final goal on the best possible amount because they could have learned more on IT security for sacrificing all this debugging experience, I prefer they do the debugging stuff because I think that's more useful long-term for the software engineering career than whether they're going to ever use a model checker again in the future.
Interesting.
I hope they do, but most likely they're going to debug and write some awesome web application, maybe not in Java, but in JavaScript. But even JavaScript is a VM, and you have to understand how it interacts with operating systems sometimes.
I have a very quick follow-up, Matt, if that's okay. You have the time?
Yeah.
I'll take half an hour.
More question.
I just wanted to ask if you might have students who complain that, okay, why we are asked to do all of this? So do you make that learning by stealth, that students learn this in a way without you telling them you're learning this, or do you make this part of your course outcome?
I made really clear from the beginning that they are supposed to learn a little bit more about how to use all those tools. And then when I gave them the task, they have been complaining a lot about it, but then I got a lot of positive feedback at the end. So I said them at the beginning, I want you to learn all this. I'm going to let you alone with that, and then you can come back and ask questions. And a lot of people, or some people, asked a lot of questions, and some people haven't asked me any question, but got it running at the end. And a lot of people have been unhappy at this point. That's for true, but then they came into video consulting hours, they came with questions, they have written to me and reached out on chat, and I started chatting with them, and we did some pair programming and set it up, and they learned it. And at the end, I got a lot of positive feedback that people said, oh, eventually I haven't learned something I was interested in originally, but I learned a lot about how to use shell script, how to run VMs, how to run compilers. One said I learned a lot about how to automate build processes, and it's so much more useful than I expected at the beginning. And if you don't have a positive experience that confirms your progress in a field, I think you're not going to turn into automating things from one day to the other. And there are also people who said at the end, yeah, they see the trade-off between getting a VM and saving a lot of time and making this learning experience. And they haven't been sure whether they would vote for the VM in the future or not. So it's a split screen at the end.
Maybe just a short question. I like the paper, Malte, and I find it really interesting because it also involves a lot of infrastructure setup, similar to how our course required a lot of setup at the beginning. With we provided students with macOS machines, and you also had a lot of infrastructure at the end that you provided to the students. But I have a question regarding the future of the course. Like, considering all the work you've put into making the course digital, would you continue doing so in the next semesters, even though maybe in-person teaching would be possible again? Or do you still think there's a benefit in doing it in a more distributed way of letting students try out on their own at home and trying to figure out the problems on their own?
I personally would keep a lot of the infrastructure stuff that people have to do it on their own machines, but I would welcome them to go through this infrastructure stuff at the beginning while being on campus. So typically we have a lab room that's like next to my office, so students could sit there and start doing their things, and if they have questions, they just came over and ask questions, and then I can help them. And I think like lowering this barrier, that's important in the future. And then I would keep the complete group files at the end remotely. I would get them back to university for final presentations.
Nice. Yeah, good approach. Sounds interesting.
And I also see, I don't know whether, I haven't read any about this in the papers yet, but I can see there's a shift from teaching hours. So a lot of people start doing their work in the evening or on weekends. So typically when I'm not around. And I think whenever we have a chance, we can make it easier for people to align work contracts or whatever they have with teaching. We should use it. So, I mean, it worked out, and they can work in the evenings. They should do it in the future as well.
Okay, I think we can have one more questions, or
does anyone else have a question?
So maybe
yes.
a brief comment, and this is perhaps in a somewhat unique position to be able to translate between the instructional cultures, but I'm noticing that that in Germany it is very common. Let's just say that there is the traditional instruction is a lecture, Vorlesung, and then there is a mode of correcting. And I noticed both of your vernacular use the word correcting things as opposed to providing feedback to things. In your opinion, in anyone's opinion in this session, has this changed much when you went socially distant and did online? Has this attitude changed? Has the mode of how you provide feedback changed dramatically? And the quality of feedback? That's what I'm wondering about.
Maybe to say it from my side, so our homework assignments, and maybe the word correction wasn't the perfect term for this, was always intended to provide feedback to give the students a way to improve the homework until we think that it's achieved our expectations or our standards that we set at the beginning. And the online learning didn't really change our expectation for the lab tutors to provide feedback and for the students to be incorporated by the students. But I think definitely the way we can answer questions in a more structured way and maybe give feedback in a way that it's more open for everybody to see definitely changed a bit. So we used, like previously, when the student had a question during the lab times, the student went to their desk and like discussed it in person in a one-to-one conversation. While in this remote setting, we had like a huge chat room where everybody could ask questions, and within threads, people could then reply and approve a reply. So everybody could skim through all the previously asked questions, which I think was quite beneficial. On the other hand, it was a bit intimidating for the students to ask questions out in the open. We actually improved on this in this semester, as we did like a virtual setting again, and we used like a similar forum type approach like Stack Overflow does online. We used like a private instance in our system, and I think providing feedback there and helping students to go to the solution in such a distributed system definitely improved this experience, because students could learn from the experience other students had, which I think was quite beneficial, which isn't really possible when you do like homework.
My question was also more about less about, I mean, it's what I'm noticing is, it's the idea of correcting and providing feedback seems to be governed by the idea of there's an expectation and you have to meet it. And I guess what I'm wondering is that the nature of the feedback change. It's less than this is the right way, more towards think about this path to the solution. So what I'm trying to get at is that when I instruct, I always try to force them to think for themselves and come up with a way towards the solution. I'm more interested in the problem solving rather than the problem solution itself. And I was wondering if that's something I noticed when I moved online, that I had to specifically focus on how do I provide them with a way to see it for themselves rather than telling them what to see. Did you have a similar? Anyone have a similar?
I would say from my side, it holds true that I try to support them in the way to get to where they should get. And I have been teaching project courses like in the past as well in presence, and then I'm not going there and say, oh, this is the correct solution, because sometimes we also don't have the one correct solution in the course. It's more like we discuss on how do we get there, how do we get an answer, how do we make the experience and get the required data points to get to good design for the task at hand, or how do we get good data points to evaluate whether what they've built works or doesn't work. And I try to help them in the process by asking some questions I'm interested in. Sometimes I'm trying to help them with a methodology they're not using. I don't tend to say, oh, this is correct or this is false. Typically, I also tend to explain why I think it's correct or why I think it's false if they hand in some files for corrections. But I haven't done in a really long time this typically correction where you say, oh, this is correct, this is wrong, and you can check it or uncheck it based on some calculation or something like that. It's more the project where, at least from my point of view, people come and they make a proposal what they're doing and they explain what they have done, and then you can say, oh, but have you tried this or have you tried that? And you should do that in presence, and it's way easier, but you can also do it online, and then you can do it in a chat or in a live session. So I have used a lot of video chatting with people to talk with them about their problems. And then it's not like I'm saying, you have to add this parameter and then your Maven script should run. I ask them, what do you think good, wrong? And yeah, you invest a lot of time this way. And that's also one of the reasons why I think it doesn't scale if you do it with too many students. But you can do that online, and I think it's a positive experience for students as well as for teachers. And it always needs time. If you do that offline, my personal experience, it doesn't take that more time online, because discussing with students on how to do something, if it takes me 2 hours offline, it's probably also taking me 2 hours online. We just have to get used on how to share screens and
or
debug
more,
things
right?
on the screen.
Yeah, or more. I think it takes a lot longer. I find myself spending a lot more time being clear in instructions, and I don't know. Maybe it's coming from Germany to the US. I'm noticing that here I feel more liberated in the sense that I'm no longer constrained to someone's expectations of what is right and what is wrong, and I very much try to instill that on my students and say, listen, find a solution, defend your choice, and it might not be the perfect solution. It might not be the right thing, but at least you had the opportunity to explore this for yourself. And so what if the result is wrong, right? As long as the path towards the decision was governed by the right choices.
Yeah.
It takes time online.
Yeah. Thank you for all the presentations and the discussions. We all living in a challenging time. In Brazil, Tanya can tell us also. And sorry for I have some problems of connections in the morning. I mean, it's still in the morning here. It's 9 o'clock. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Marian. Thanks, everyone. And so we are closing the sections, okay?
Thank you, everyone. We now have, depending on your time zone, you have an hour for dinner or an hour for lunch or an hour for breakfast, and we'll see each other again. We'll see each other again at 8 o'clock Central European for the next session on feedback and assessment and grading.
14 o'clock Central European.
Oh, what did I say? 8 o'clock. I'm sorry.
8 o'clock, yeah.
8 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. European.
9 o'clock in Brazil.
All right. Have a good day. See you soon.
Bye.
Nice day. Bye.